So I'm calling this meeting to order, the Sherborn Conservation Commission, April 1st, 2021, virtual meeting authorized by the state, yada, yada. Fantastic. So in terms of the agenda, do we have any topics that could not have been anticipated 48 hours in advance?
Sure, hope not.
I guess no, I don't think we need to do it, but whether we need to put Laurel Fields on the map at some point for the warrant article.
Yes, we do need to put it on some point.
So we should do it maybe in our next meeting. It's actually, well, the public hearing's on April 10th. But I guess in terms of for town meeting, basically, we need something.
Yep. Okay.
Next agenda, you said?
Yeah, let's put it on there. All right. Okay, great. So let's see. Oh boy, I got lots of doorbells ringing here today.
Yeah.
Oh, hello.
Hey, James.
Becoming
Hello.
regular, Courtney.
All right, so let's jump forward here. Poetry reading. Anybody have anything they want to share?
I do.
Great.
Anybody else instead of me who hasn't had a turn? No. Okay. All right. Well, in keeping with my history of this, I'm going to read from something of one of my heroes. And this is from an essay written by David Brower. How many people know who David Brower was? Of course, Kelly.
I remember vaguely.
Can you spell the last name for me, Jean?
Brower.
Thank you.
He's considered to be the father of modern environmentalism. He was the executive director of the Sierra Club for 20 years. And while he was the director, the membership went from 70 to 700,000. He was later the founder of the Friends of the Earth. He was twice nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, and he successfully stopped dams at Dinosaur National Monument and Grand Canyon National Park. So this is a piece of an essay he wrote just about a year before he died in 2000. And the essay is titled, "For Those Who Would Save the Earth." And I'm just reading snippets of it. At times you need to take some risks to save the future. Pacific Gas and Electric must regret it took the risk I warned against, the threat to the future. The power company blithely told its ratepayers that Diablo Canyon nuclear reactor would cost less than $400 million. So far, PG&E has spent $5 billion and counting, and decommissioning looms ahead as an added, unknown, potentially disastrous expense. Taking risks has been my trouble in the environmental movement. I have my regrets. I regret having hurt people.
Thank you.
In the thick of it, you can become abrasive. Once a friend was working for me on budget matters, and I thought he was working me over. He said, "I'm only trying to protect you." And I reacted angrily and said, "You protect me with the back of your hand." I hurt him and had not meant to. That flip statement did not come from an educated heart. An uneducated heart makes many mistakes. Better to change minds than to create grudges. And have a good time saving the world, or you're just going to depress yourself. People want to be part of something fun. It's exciting to change the world. If you're in it simply out of worry or guilt, you won't last, and normal people won't join you. People want to love life if love hasn't been crushed out of them when they were children. Learning to read the earth and saving it is fascinating stuff. Put fun in the movement to conserve, preserve, and restore, and celebrate it, and people will run to sign up. Otherwise, once again, it can only be Tanqueray time, and time to drink deep of despondency. And by the way, I think Tanqueray owes me a grant. And that's it.
Nice.
Okay, fun tonight then.
That's it. Thank you.
Always
Jean.
fun, always fun.
That's great. All right, thank you, Jean.
Yeah.
Where was
So-
that from, Jean? I missed
It's
the beginning.
It was from an essay written by David Brower, and the essay is called "For Those Who Would Change the Earth."
Nice. All righty. Next up on our agenda tonight is conservation land use, and it looks like you got trail cameras in the queue.
I did because we didn't, I put it there because we didn't come up with any sort of decision last time. I frankly haven't put any thought into it. I'm sorry. But I
Okay.
think, somebody made an inquiry and is probably waiting for an answer. And we talked about privacy issues last time.
Right. And yeah, no, we didn't make a decision. So if somebody remind me, what was the inquiry we're making about? It was about state law, correct? Like whether there was any specific provision around cameras on public land or something like that. I just don't remember.
From what I recall, Neil, is that we got an inquiry from someone who wanted to post cameras facing out on, I don't know if it's whether or not it was state land or town land. And the discussion that the commission had was whether or not that would infringe upon our rights to privacy as such.
Right.
So, and I failed to mention that individual whose name escapes me right now. He did send us an email a couple of days ago and told us specifically that he was not going to engage any further in that project.
Oh, okay. So he's sort of withdrawing his request.
Right. Now, I don't know whether or not the camera discussion is in addition to that comment that I just made about that one individual.
Well, I think that's why we were talking about it, was because of that request. So
Okay, good.
if they, I mean, we can certainly spend time talking about it, but why would we? Unless we want to set a policy right now, but I don't necessarily, given the packed nature of our agenda, I don't necessarily think we need to do that tonight. So, all right, so let's just move on then. Bike trail at Peters Hill.
Yeah, this is still in the works. We had a phone call from a woman who's in a butter to Peters Hill, and she identified her neighbor as somebody who is making unauthorized bike trails on Peters Hill and really very close to her property boundary. He's doing the thing of clearing, building jumps, but he's also cutting trees with a chainsaw. She didn't really know what her authority was, but she has mentioned to him that he should be aware that he should be in touch with the Conservation Commission. Dave is going to make a visit there with the woman who contacted us so that she can show him the work. And I guess we could wait to see what Dave has to say, but I have a suggestion for what to do if he does, in fact, determine that this is happening on conservation land.
Okay.
I think we've been a little, I think this is just getting a little out of control. And I think the soft approach, I think we need to step it up here. I think, he should be contacted once Dave is certain he's working on conservation land. I think he should be contacted officially with a letter. He should be asked to get in touch with us so that he understands just what is required in order to restore the work that he did. And, in my opinion, the correspondence should say that if he doesn't get in touch with us and doesn't restore by a certain date, that he will be subject to fines.
I would agree with that.
All right, Kelly, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to observe that the Peters Hill boundaries pull back from the road a fair amount. And I just want to emphasize, and Jean was emphasizing that David should confirm this is indeed on the conservation land. And I think that would be very much of the first step, because personally, I walked the loop trail yesterday, which goes very close to the boundaries, and could see no evidence of a trail like that.
Yeah, this woman said that it doesn't, at this point yet, his work does not connect with any existing trails.
Yeah. But I was very close to the boundary and I thought I would have seen it.
Mm-hmm. She also seemed to be pretty clear about where the boundaries were. And if you look at the assessor's map, she has, I think, 14 acres. She knows she's got stone walls embracing her whole property. So.
Okay. Dave,
Well,
when
I
you
just as an aside, if I could please, yes, I did reach out to the individual that called into the office, and I'm waiting for a return phone call. And perhaps I'll just try to reach out to her again tomorrow. I had called her yesterday in the late morning.
okay, so you don't have a set date yet when you're going out, but you'll,
I'll let you know. I'll let you know immediately upon hearing from her.
okay, great.
Yep.
Just on your comment, Gene, about what response we ought to have if we do find it's on conservation land, I do agree with you that we ought to, respond more vigorously, just so that we make it clear that this is not activity that we, have given permission for and is not welcome without Conservation Commission input. So, okay, great.
Can I,
Yes.
because we are on conservation land use and we still have 3 minutes,
Mhm.
the last time we spoke about the bike trails, the unauthorized bike trails near Perry Street, I remember that Rafe and probably Kelly also said that Forest and Trails would be willing to help restore. And I'd just like to pursue that with them. Rick Antel has been out there again recently and has put up signs saying, don't go this way. It's unsafe. And he's actually with Dave and then also by himself, he's tried to blanket the unauthorized trail with already downed vegetation. And Rick says that he thinks the project of taking down the jumps and filling the holes would probably take 2 people an hour. So I'm just putting it out there. We're looking for help to do that.
Yeah, I can concur if I could please, Gene, with a trip we took out to Perry, I don't know, a week ago or so. And there were a couple of trails that were obviously made probably during the last year or so. And as Mr. Attell alluded to, there are some jumps which can certainly be a significant liability potentially. But as he said, some of these areas can be filled in with organic material. It's right around the area, obviously, in under an hour. And we did put out some vegetation that would help prevent perhaps people using those trails where those jumps were. We were out there pulling around branches and tree limbs and that sort of thing.
I guess I would just add one comment that to thank Rafe. I don't know if he's on, but he did post our statement on the Sherborn Forest and Trail site, and he touched base with Dave Colleen to get his agreement that it could be joint with town forest lands as well. So it's described as public lands.
Okay.
Thank you, Ray.
Very welcome. There was just one quick outstanding question. I think I replied back to Carol, just in terms of just the action item, because I think my wording was slightly different where I had volunteered to kind of say, here's what you can't do and here's where you can't do it. But if you have questions, I put the Sherborn Forest and Trail email address and website there just to give people an action item. Whereas I think your wording had said contact Conservation Commission or Town Forest, which is fine, but there was like no link or anything. And I just figured we wanted to make it, we wanted to give people an action item that would be easy. And also a lot of times people don't know which one they're supposed to contact. So I was sort of volunteering SFTA to kind of be the contact point for that and then direct it to the right person. But that was just a little nuance that I wasn't sure was, your preferred way to go.
Oh,
Yeah,
that sounds good.
Yeah, I agree. That's good. And I'm sorry I didn't get back to you about that, but I thought the commission should weigh in anyway.
Oh, okay, perfect. Great.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else on this topic at the moment?
We thought we would also send an email out to our full email list with essentially the same information as just a way of getting the word out. That was the only other thing I kind of came up with in terms of getting the word out. But we're going to talk about that at our meeting Monday. Shouldn't be an issue.
Great. Sounds good. Thank you, Rafe. Okay. 7:15, we've got 38 Meadowbrook Road RDA for soil testing.
Dan McIntyre is here, or he was.
Yes, I'm here.
Ah, there you are.
Dan, you want
Yeah,
to tell us about this?
Sure. This is soil testing for a failed septic system at 38 Meadowbrook Road. We've been retained to design a replacement septic system for the homeowner. Do you have, what do you want me to share my screen with a map or?
I can do it for you if you want.
Okay,
Is it,
all right.
are we talking about the, just within the RDA paperwork?
Yeah, there's a GIS sketch we
Yeah,
provided.
let me just bring it up. Hold on one second.
Okay.
Of course, somebody wants to get in. You'll have to wait. Let's see. I think that's the one.
But there are wetlands on two sides of this property.
Mm-hmm. All right, let me just. Is this?
Probably on the last page, I think. There it is.
Is that it? Is that?
Yes.
Can everybody see that?
Mhm. Yes.
Okay.
So
Dan,
they're at the
Dan-
corner of Meadowbrook and Gray Road. And Gray Road is pretty much just a dead end street right there. The driveway is off Meadowbrook, and there are wetlands on, let's say, the north side and the south side of the property. And they're connected by hydraulic connection between the two, which appears to be a man-made ditch that someone dug at some point. There is what the homeowner called the aqueduct that runs along the property on the south side of the property. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but it's a ridge of looks like an old railroad bed or something to me, but it really divides the property from the wetland to the south. And we're proposing to do soil testing in the lawn area on the aqueduct side of the house in order to avoid the well areas from the neighbors and the on-site well, which is essentially in the existing system area. We're going to propose to do testing. But I suspect that we're going to be within 100 feet of the wetlands. Just taping off the man-made ditch, we'll be within 100 feet of that. I don't think we'll be within 100 feet of the wetlands to the north of the property. And again, the wetlands to the south of the property is really protected by that raised aqueduct.
So Dan, when you work on a site like this and you're only going towards soil testing, do you have an understanding of how to recognize the edge of a wetland yourself?
Yes. It's pretty, I'm not qualified to delineate wetlands like a wetland scientist is, but in this particular situation, it's pretty obvious where the wetlands are. There's actually a fence at the edge of the property. It's all lawn there now, and then the ditch is pretty obvious. The wetlands to the north, Meadowbrook is a filled area, so you can see the bank of the roadway fill that delineates the edge of the wetlands. So in this particular case, it's pretty obvious where the wetlands are.
Okay, do people have other questions?
No, I'm familiar with this property and it's pretty straightforward. It's all disturbed with it where he's looking to do the test pits. It's all just, it's lawn, it's disturbed. And like Dan said, there's that aqueduct there, so it separates it from the wetland behind or to the
Okay.
south.
So the question is whether, do we have any conditions at all?
I think I read in the RDA, once the test pits are, or maybe I read it on the summary, I'm not sure, but that once the test pits are dug, they'll refill so that it'll be filled in.
Oh yes, we're only going to be out there for a few hours and then
Yeah.
we fill in the holes.
Yep.
And Dave made the recommendation that the areas be reseeded immediately. You're going to do that, Dan?
I think we can do that at this time of year. It should take.
Uh-huh.
We're getting into the springtime, so we can throw some seed down.
Let me
But
ask
the
you,
homeowner is planning on going right into this because the system is in failure. It's backing up into the house, so they've blocked up. They had a plumber block up the basement bathroom so it can't get in. So they're in kind of a hurry for this one. So I suspect it's going to move right along.
Hey, Dan, it's Carol McGarry. Quick question. I can't tell the grade. Is it level? Is the whole yard level? I'm just wondering if there's any grading toward that ditch.
No, it's flat out there.
Okay.
Okay. Well, any other questions? All right. Well, I move that we approve this RDA, and I know I see negative determination 2 just in your notes, Dave, but I think we're at 3 because it's
Is it? Okay, I was going to ask you that, actually.
yeah,
yes.
2 I think is resource area because it's area subject to protection, which I actually had to go and look up myself. I was like, wait a minute, is that jurisdiction or is that actual resource area? But that's what in the WPA it's resource area, so it's a -3. So I move that we approve this RDA with -3 with the conditions stated that no additional work is permitted within the wetland buffer zone. All disturbed areas should be reseeded immediately after completion of work. And a separate RDA would need to be filed for septic work.
Second.
Do we want to include the last one? As a
Probably not. I'll take that friendly amendment. I sort of paused there because I was like, is that really a condition?
I was hoping you could go.
Thank you. I'll take that friendly amendment. So do I get a second?
Yeah, second.
Thank you. All right, all those in favor, Cindy?
Aye.
Neil? Aye. Jean?
Aye.
Courtney?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Carol?
Aye.
Jessica?
Aye.
All right, the motion passes. Okay, thank you, Dan.
Well, thank you very much. So
Thanks,
Dave,
Dan.
if you could get that over to the Board of Health as soon as you can. The homeowner is kind of anxious to get this moving.
Fair enough.
All right, thank you very much.
I'll give you a call and or an email upon receipt of the signed document.
Okay, great. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Good night.
Night.
Aye.
All right. We've got a little time on our hands, about 8 minutes. We have minutes?
We don't, actually.
What? I feel an emptiness. Do we have site issues, that kind of thing?
Dave, any side issues?
And just making a note, sorry.
That's fine.
Site issues. Nothing that immediately comes to mind, but Michael, and I'm grateful that you had brought that up, is, you know, Laurel Hill, is it? Laurel Farms. Yeah, that's something I think that at some point we should really take some time and just review in earnest. But outside of that, no, thank you.
Okay. Do we want to talk about violations? Do we have time, or do you want to, should we buzz through some administrative approvals? I just don't know what the 2 violations that are on there are going to take in terms of time.
Well, one is only a potential violation, 68 Maple. We're still not sure. And the other one, 34 South Main, is, you know, I was looking for an update from Dave, but I think it might take more than 5 minutes. So
Okay.
I could throw in a note about something else.
Is it on our agenda?
Well,
Is it a site issue?
there was going to be an announcement.
All right, let's try it. Let's take it out for a spin and see if it fits.
It's just that we really need to get out, do a site visit to the trail work, the unauthorized trail work in the Stoolbrook area. We've talked about this for on and off for months, and I was just going to propose that we think about April 17th and April 24th. Those are both Saturdays, and I will send out an email, or Dave will send out an email asking people on which of those Saturdays.
I already know I'm not available, but I have a question. Why couldn't we tag it on to this Saturday?
Well, I can't go.
Oh, okay.
And I think Dave is doing a lot of other field work after
Yeah.
the 211 site visit.
That's correct.
Is that just something I can go and walk around myself, Jean, on my own time?
Yeah, if you feel comfortable knowing where to go, I would say yeah. Anyway, that's it. I'm just going to be polling people to see if they can come on a Saturday at the middle or the end of the month.
Would,
Cindy, bring Rick Antel's maps of the established trails, and he put on them the new trails, and it'll make it a lot easier for you to sort them out.
Sure, thanks.
all right, with 4 minutes, can we do 68 Maple?
I could run, if you have faith that I can get through it in 4 minutes.
Well, look, we can always pause it and come back to it. So why don't we?
That's right. So, yes. Several weeks ago, the commission received an inquiry regarding work being done at 68 Maple. And I went up to a resident's property that made the request that the Conservation Commission look into this. I went to the base of their property and I took several photographs of actual cutting of trees and forests, and a forest, I should say, that is happens to be situated in between two relatively large wetland complexes. And my role going out there was to look for hydrics and basically set up an informal boundary as best I could based on what I determined was a buffer zone and possibly an isolated vegetated wetland that happened to be on the property in which I was observing this from. I pulled hydrics from, I think, 3 or 4 different spots, up and low, and they basically all came back glade. I had a, I'm sorry, I don't recall the name of the device, but I had this measuring device that you run on you roll it, and the topography back there, it's impossible. So I had a tape measure, and I taped it out as best I could. And it was close to, close, if not plus or minus 100 feet out. The area in particular on the property in which I was making the observation, that's a significant complex. And I believe part of it is defined on several GIS mapping systems, including our own. But that I'm not completely certain of. It shows up on national inventory similarly. So yeah, it was obvious that there was significant cutting done back there. A little backdrop, the property is plus or minus 18 acres. Several decades ago and a half, they filed with DCR to get a forest cutting permit. And if I'm not mistaken, they had a really sort of ill-defined 1985 style delineation, which I didn't really take too much into account given the time between then and now. I have several concerns. This is not, I don't find any evidence of a forest cutting permit through DCR. And I found out earlier today that I believe it's filed chapter 61. What did I say?
61A.
Thank you, under the agricultural provisions. But even if that's the case, the WP and the local bylaw doesn't recognize that permit process itself, exclusionary of any wetlands laws. So yeah, 100 feet out with the hydrics, doing the tape. And then when I looked at GIS, and I'm sorry, I'm not prepared to present that to you at this very moment, but I'll certainly get it to you shortly hereafter. There's a massive complex on the north side. It's very extensive. It's got to be, at least it maps out to 20 plus acres. And there are multiple stream systems just north of that are certainly above this property, off this property going north. And there's also substantial stream activity and resource areas on the south side of Maple. But having said all that, I get back to this one resource area that I saw on GIS and referred that back to photographs going back to, I think it was black and white photos going back to 97, 98 on GIS and up to date. And it does appear that there's evidence of, work back there. I'd like to commission to think about drafting a letter and asking permission, not, I'm sorry, asking, drafting a letter and asking the owner of the property, ring the conservation office in the next, couple of days. We have reason to think that there might be an unauthorized activity going out there unpermitted. And we got this information from, an anonymous source kind of thing. However you folks want to define it.
Okay.
So there you go. Any questions?
Yes, except I want us to jump into the SFTA discussion because it was
Okay.
slated that for 7:30. So let's do that and we'll come back to this, but thank you for the background.
Sure.
Okay, let's see. So 7:30, Sherborn Forest and Trails. There's trail maintenance permitting that people want to discuss. And so I just don't know who's here representing SFTA, and if you want to go ahead and present.
Well, Neil, let me introduce it anyway. And we've got
Sure.
a number of our most active trail workers here with Rafe, Rob Wolf, Seth, and I'm not sure if it's Laura or Sam hiding behind the Laura Van Blarkham notice, but it's a lot of our most active people, and they can explain best the exact kind of work. But the regulatory framework in which this would fit is confusing. And I'd like to start by explaining that. So in essence, in summary, we want to be able to do very routine trail work, clearing branches and stuff like that, anywhere on conservation property without coming for permission. This is on existing trails. Now, anytime we want to do the same thing on town forest, we would have to go to them. If we're doing it someplace else, we'd have to go to the landowner. But for conservation properties, it is a simple management decision for the Conservation Commission to say, okay, anywhere except in wetlands, you can do this. And it's not an NOI, it doesn't require a hearing, it just requires a decision. But if Rafe is wandering along a trail clearing branches and he comes to a buffer zone, it really doesn't make any sense for him all of a sudden to have to go to David in a 2-week notice, and should be able to keep right on going. But this is just for existing trails and routine maintenance, nothing fancy. The second broad category, we would like to be able to do some relatively simple bridge work, which is not covered under the existing order of conditions, and make it so that it doesn't require a new NOI, but does require going to the commission for whatever discussion, whatever approvals may be necessary. And that would be not just on conservation land, but on town forest, anywhere else. So there are two different kinds of approvals. There's the general management approval for lands not in wetlands or buffer, and a change in the order of conditions for activities that are in the wetlands or buffer. And I know David was confused, David Killeen was confused about how this might affect town forest. And it really wouldn't change our relationship with Dave Killeen at all. It would just mean that we would deal with him and wouldn't have to go to the commission to do routine clearing, but would have to go to the commission and David for any work like a bridge.
Okay.
Would the commission like more explanation of the kind of work we would do, in which case I'd call on the other SFTA folks, or questions about how it would be implemented?
Are we taking them one by one, the two areas?
I don't know that it matters. If you have some questions or comments, just why don't you go for it, Michael?
I guess on the first one, which is just the routine maintenance, we're basically trying to get out whether we need, I guess you're talking about the current order of conditions, as you noted, section 14, where there's notification to and approval by for routine maintenance of existing trails. Is that the section that we're talking about trying to make a little easier?
Exactly. Just taking those specific tasks and moving them back to section 13,
Right.
which is no approval required. And that's on the assumption that this is very benign work. And whether it's in wetland or not in wetland, it makes sense to allow SFTA teams to do it when they're on the trail.
I guess I would try to figure out whether there's some subset of those routine activities that I could easily see moving myself. I can't tell whether work around, I guess, resurfacing the treadway.
That's not included. That's not in the proposal.
Okay, so you're talking about only a subset of the routine, the first.
Yes.
Okay, so we're talking
So-
about like the first 4 or 5.
Well, which
Well,
one?
yeah, which ones specifically are they talking about? I'm looking at it right now. So which,
Could somebody pull up the general?
Yeah, let me do it. I've got
I
it
can
right.
do that
I'm
easily.
staring at it, so let me just bring it up for you.
Like, do you want me to, or you're doing it? Okay,
I got it.
okay,
This is the set under 14, right?
right.
Yeah.
So the question is, I see number 1, 2, 3,
And
4. Yeah, I mean, about 5, let's see.
I did not include number 2.
Okay, so which ones were they? Then why don't you go through and tell us which one?
3, 4, period.
Okay, I have no problem with that.
sorry, I you know, it blipped out. Did you say 1, 3, and 4?
1, yeah,
If it comes to maintaining the erosion features, if we're building water bars or something like that, there's no reason why I mean, we're not going to do that on the spur of the moment, and there's no reason why we can't just come and tell David and see what everybody thinks. It's the 1, 3, and 4 that we would want to do just as we're walking the trail.
Is there a hardship with that work order thing, that little 1-page? I know it says it's a 2-page, but it's really not, because the second page is just the signature page, so I don't even count that. But it's like a 1-page like work order thing that, you know, just it's sort of a I look at it as more of a communication document or tool. Is there some kind of hardship associated with that?
It's a
Like-
convenience. Maybe Ray.
I think it's just the practicality of doing it.
Well,
Yeah, you could give
Michael, let them answer because they're the ones doing the work.
Well, no, I do it anyway myself, actually.
Well,
You go on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to jump in if that makes sense, but you know, I mean, one thing that may slightly be helpful, it's a little bit of a tangent, but pretty much all of the down trees. I mean, this is pretty much a quick chainsaw of like a branch that's blocking the trail, and I pretty much actually log all of those on Trail Forks. So if anybody's ever interested, I usually take a before and after picture also. So we actually have like months of history of kind of what these look like, and you can actually see like a clear, dry trail, you know, without the branch, if that's helpful. But at any one point in time, I can pull up the status on that website as well and know where all the spots are. But so I kind of have this list that's like always there of things to do that I'm always wanting to get out and do. And I went out, you know, on Sunday in one spot, and I ended up having a problem getting through this big pine tree. So I've got it on my list to go back. And I was actually just been pinging Sam back and forth as to whether we're going to try to go out Saturday morning, or then we actually thought we might have an hour this afternoon to go do it. So it's just one of those things. It's like when we have, you know, a half an hour to go do something, we do it, but it's just kind of when our schedule frees up. So it's really around making us more productive, you know, because if we've got that little slot of time like that, we can just kind of go and do it, as opposed to like planning ahead for a particular time and then it ends up raining and we need to reschedule or something comes up in either one of our busy lives. So I see what you're saying, Cindy. It's not, you know, it's not a huge burden, but we're just trying to be as productive as we can. And sometimes this stuff is, we may find out about it very quickly and then just want to go back and clear something quickly. So it's for that convenience. But again, maybe even just having that before and after picture most of the time too. I can't commit to it 100% of the time, but almost always we're going to have that. So if there was any ever question about what was done, or if it seemed inappropriate or bigger than what people had in mind when they agreed to this, we kind of have that documented too.
So can I just make a couple of comments? Thank you, Ray. I think a couple of things. One is the reasoning behind this condition 14 is sensible. It's something that we do with the commission all the time, which is we want to be aware of activity in jurisdictional areas, because oftentimes folks that are out doing stuff just aren't aware. They aren't aware that maybe there's some rare species there, some plant. Maybe they're not aware that they're actually in a wetland when they think they're in a buffer zone, because they're not experts and we don't expect anybody to be. So I think the reason in my mind behind this condition around any kind of work that's in jurisdictional areas is just that kind of thing. Like, we want to know if there's going to be activity there so that we can kind of have the dialogue if we need to have it, or otherwise just be aware of it. So I think for me, conceptually, having this in place the way it is now, that's the purpose it serves. I think that three things that you're sort of talking about exempting from that, they sort of fall into a gray area, because on their own, independent of anything, they seem completely harmless, right? So I'm not like up in arms about the fact that we want to clear the treadways of obstacles. It's just not, in and of itself, it seems okay. But there's a thing I'm thinking about, like, is there a way to have these kinds of things where this form gets filled out? And I guess part of me wants to just ask, because I don't know procedurally, like, if you fill out a form like this, if you're going to go out in the next couple of weeks, but you just don't know when, but you're going to be on conservation land and potentially in jurisdictional areas, so that it's a little bit more broadly covering you, but it's not like if you don't go out that day, then the form is sort of moot. And so I'm just want to ask about whether we can just kind of make it a little bit easier. You're going to be out on conservation land. And if you get to that border, then you don't have to say, oh, I got to stop. You just say, well, I already filed this form that says I'm going to be out on conservation land, potentially in jurisdictional areas. I'm wondering if something like that would be kind of a good middle ground.
Yeah, because the form does not specify a date by which the work has to occur.
Yeah, so then if you're planning on doing those trails at some point, that would work. Kelly?
Yeah, would it satisfy, one of our thoughts about this is that SFTA crews really do know what they're doing and might not be able to delineate the wetland, but they're not going to do stupid stuff. And would it satisfy what you're talking about if once or twice a year we submitted a generalized plan that we're going to be doing such and such on not just this specific trail, but on the trails, and give you a report once or twice a year?
Well, earlier Rafe said that he's got a running list of things that either has already been done, or projects that he knows eventually need to be done. So
Yeah,
I don't have any objection with.
Hold on.
That does not include if I'm walking the trail and there is a branch down across the path, I throw it off.
Yeah, right,
I'm not
Kelly.
supposed to.
If I could finish,
All right.
I don't see the hardship in filling out the notice to complete work form and citing, several potential locations where X, Y, and Z activities are proposed to occur within, the spring or the summer or what have you, and identifying them just roughly, either with photographs. Identifying where they are with photographs or with a sketch of where they are, and submitting that, and, receiving approval after the agent has an opportunity to either consult his own maps or to go and take a look. And please don't forget, we have a new agent now who isn't familiar with where exactly the wetlands are on conservation land. It was a different case with Allery, who after a couple of years, she traipsed around and could just say, from her prior knowledge, yes, this is going to be in jurisdictional area, or no, it's not. So back to what I was going to say, I don't see any problem with filling out the form, giving us notice of work that's intended over a period of time, and having the agent go and check out those locations. And having that approval last for, the duration of the spring and summer. I think, not
feel like
notifying us at all, it just raises a whole lot of what ifs in my mind. Like, what if there's an activity planned, a public activity planned, and what you're hoping to do is to come out with chainsaws and work for even just a half an hour in an area where people are going to be bird watching? Or what if, the likely choice of where you would, you cut up a tree or a big branch and you want to dispose of it off the trail, but do you know whether or not there are plants there that are just about to produce seed that we're trying to, allow successful reproduction of, plants that are unusual or rare? I mean, just without thinking about it for very long, I can come up with a few situations where it would be good for the managers of the land, being the Conservation Commission, to know ahead of time about the work.
Do other commissioners or anybody from SFTA want to weigh in on what we're talking about?
I have a question. So presumably this has come up a few times, and like, how long is the delay with the form, just practically?
Well, the order says, excuse me, the order says the form has to be submitted so that it can be reviewed and approved at a normal meeting of the Conservation Commission. We could consider it being a matter of submitting the form and allowing the agent enough time to go and take a look, rather than having to wait for a meeting.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead,
Well,
Claire.
because I guess I'm inclined. So things like clearing the trail of an obstacle, like I struggle with saying that we need to go through a really big process for that. And just in terms of commission resources and an element of practicality, like, so much stuff is falling down in town and we have these volunteers who are willing to like take care of stuff. And I just want to find some balance between like, what is the practicality of using our very limited, agent time to review every single time they need to move a branch. But I do hear what you're saying. And I wonder if because I don't even know with our agent just having started here, there's a lot of, if you're worried about rare plants, it's like some of those locations are only known to like local experts. I mean, would it be more practical to delineate areas that we're going to call sensitive, that we would prefer them not to do this activity in, and then give blanket approval for other areas?
Well, that's a good suggestion. That's a couple of days worth of work at least, even just for Barber. But yeah, that's something we should be doing anyway. But I just want to point out that, what we're talking about in terms of this order of conditions is obviously jurisdictional areas. It's not upland areas. And for upland areas, my first point is not to demean anybody, but, do most volunteers on the Forest and Trails Association know how to identify a buffer zone? I mean, it's tricky when like it's August and the wetland itself is completely dried out. It's still a wetland, but you can't really see it. And yet it does still have a buffer zone. So if I felt comfortable with that, which is a big ask, then this would be a different conversation. The majority of the trails, I could say at least at Barber and probably a lot of the other reservations, are in uplands. And we're not talking about that right now. And while I'm bringing it up, I think that, well, I'll just stop there and talk about uplands later.
I think, Gene, one of the motivations, at least from me, is that maybe a broader question, is there a way that we can bound activities and develop a relationship that would make the committee comfortable with having an agreement with, specifically with SFTA. And if that included, committing to education so that we would become more knowledgeable and be able to do those things. We found some other agreement in Essex County, and they actually committed to having an expert on their board that was able to identify wetlands. And so something like that, I think is worth talking about. Like how can we get to that place where we have trust enough that because from a practical sense, if we want our trails to be clear, you just have to be able to go out and cut stuff.
I think, yeah, I saw that in the Essex document that this trail maintenance organization has their own in-house expert, and wow, that's a luxury. And if somebody on SFDA developed wetland identification skills, that would be fantastic. But I think the relationship that you're seeking is doable at this point in time with, as I suggested earlier, by using the existing form and the existing methodology, filling out the form as broadly as you see you folks being capable of attending to over the course of several months, and giving the agent the opportunity to go look.
So can I say a couple things? Because I don't think this is, I don't think this has anything to do with trust at all. The way the commission works is we are charged with protecting conservation lands and balancing uses in conservation land between conservation, passive recreation, and obviously I think SFTA is interested in exactly the same thing. Making trails accessible, getting people outside, valuing our open spaces. It's a treasure and one of the real gifts of living in Vermont. I mean, in Sherborn. I've got Vermont in the brain. I've just been thinking about it. But Sherborn always reminded me of that. Anyway, that's not the point. The point is that, I think the goals are the same. The part I think I'm having the most trouble with in this discussion, truthfully, is I think that the exception you're looking for is so small and makes really, in my mind, practically so little difference in what you have to do that I don't necessarily understand the need for the change. So in other words, if we're saying, you could just let us know the places you're going to go and the work you're going to do over the spring and summer. So we're not saying that, if Rafe and another person or a group of people have time this weekend, that's not prevented to just jump out and do it. We're not preventing that. The only difference is we just want to know about it ahead of time so that we can just go and make sure, like we do with any group at all, any group. It doesn't even matter if they're a trained wetland scientist or not. If they're not on the commission or they're not an agent or an authorized agent of the commission, we want to know what's going on before it goes on. So we just make sure that the things that we're charged with administering and protecting are in place. And I mean, I look at this form, and especially in this situation, and say, I just don't see the burden. I just don't see it.
I think from my perspective, the most specific we could be is over the spring and the summer, we're going to be on all the trails on conservation land. If something falls, we're going to cut it. That we can't be that broad and it really be useful, because that's the reality. Over the spring and the summer, if a storm happens, we're going to be on any trail on conservation land, right? Wherever the thing fell. Otherwise, it's a really, for it to be useful, it has to be a much smaller bounded time. Like, next week, I know there's something down on this particular trail, but if you go beyond that, it's just vague. You can't be very specific about where you're going to be, right?
I'm curious as to why you, you suggested that we look at this document from Essex, because, it seems like they're following the same methodology that we are. And, they're giving the commission an opportunity to know in advance of the work they're proposing to do. And the agent or somebody on the commission goes and reviews the project in some way. And then in the Essex document, it also says, the work to be approved at the next regular conservation meeting. So, and I also noticed that someone at some point said that you had looked into how other towns handle this, and Essex was the only town you came up with an example, and that didn't surprise me, because this order of conditions that we have, I've heard from agents in other towns that this is really unique, and frankly, I think it's kind of a gift, because you have to keep in mind that, as Neil was saying, we're bound under the Wetlands Protection Act to review any activity that's proposed in the jurisdictional area. We're just, that's the law. And this order of conditions gives a really handy workaround, or, it just makes us applying the law pretty darn easy.
I'm not necessarily the one out doing the chainsawing and the work, but Sam, my husband, is one of the ones who is. And I know, like, if there's a huge storm, that Sam and Rafe and Seth and Rob might have a moment to go out that day, like later that day, if they're, we're right across the street from Bailey in particular. And I think someone had mentioned, there's so much work that SFTA puts into helping and clearing the trails on Concom land, as well as all other trails. I think, thank you, Courtney, for mentioning how much goes into it, and just the in the sense of it's volunteer work. And I think the problem comes when it is a spur of the moment. There's a storm, there's something that's blocking a major trail. And I can't remember whose idea it was, but if there are areas specifically you guys don't want us to go in, if there is, I don't know if that could be helpful. Jean, I think you'd mentioned that's something that should be done anyways. Are there areas you specifically just don't want anything done in? Because that would be a very different thing than just staying away from there's so much wetland in Sherborn. There's so much wetland in Sherborn.
Also, during like giant storms, like what if a tree comes down, like a giant tree knocks down like huge trail, knocks down other trees, like brush everywhere. Isn't that causing more damage to like shading wetlands or new seedlings coming up? Like, isn't that causing more problems than us clearing it out of the way and putting it in a pile way off trail?
Out of the wetlands?
Well, it maybe not. Some of it is, it's part of the natural succession of it. But, one thing you're saying, which is kind of giving me a little bit of pause, or just making me think a little bit, is like this notion of, I think of it like, are there situations that are kind of more, I don't want to use the word emergency because I don't know if it's an emergency, but something where, I don't want to commit us to try and have some kind of quicker turnaround on certain things, but I do think that, if there's like a big storm and there's an opportunity for you guys to go out and act quickly, I do wonder whether there's some mechanism we can build into this that allows us to kind of be notified, and have at least some just sort of quick dialogue about it before you go out, or something like that, where we at least shrink the time frame so that you're not hampered in that kind of situation. There's an element of that I think makes sense, but I'm just thinking out loud.
Well, we have 1 minute left, so I'm going to make a suggestion.
Yes.
I'd like you folks to consider the more broad sweeping filling out of this form for work that you're already aware of. And in terms of emergency blowdowns or blocking of trails because of storms, maybe we could consider, and this is up to the commission, not me, if one of you folks wants to go out right after a storm, sending out an email to all the members of the commission. And between the 8 of us, including Dave, it's very likely that one of us is familiar with the area and could respond to it and say, please hold off, or sure, go ahead.
Yeah.
Anything that can be done to make this a little more electronic in real time, I think would be great, because for me to fill out a form, it'd be a lot easier for me to email a link and you'll have a geo tagged, picture that shows you around the trail where it is. Because to try to describe that is going to be really hard. So it'd be a much easier way to see it.
You can submit the form by, you can submit the form electronically, and you can, we can give it a try if you're just going to submit a map that you pull up off of a website.
Yeah, and the only other tiny bit of pushback I'd have if I've got 10 seconds to do it is just, is there an alternative? Like if we have an established trail and there's a 4-inch branch that is stopping you from walking across it, are you going to come out and look and go, don't move the branch? We're going to like reroute the trail or leave the branch there. Like, I'm just not sure the level of maintenance that we're doing is most of the time is even falls under a jurisdiction of, if I'm walking a trail now out of habit, if there's a 3-inch branch that someone might trip over, I move it to the side, so that somewhere there's a line, right, that says like, what's that? Like, you would fill out a form to do that, right? Or am I supposed to leave everything untouched, even if it's right in the middle of a trail that people are walking on?
You're kind of pushing the absurd on us.
I'm not trying to, but most of the maintenance that we do is that it's a branch in the scope of the trail. We're not touching anything that isn't already on the trail. You know what I mean? So anyway, so we'll probably defer. We don't have time, but it really is pretty minimal.
Hold on. Dave has been trying to get a word in there for a bit, so we'll push a minute or two past here.
Yeah, I'll make it quick, Neil. Thank you. So I'm presuming there was a delineation done of this property at some point.
Which property?
Well, these are all conservation lands, so that's
right.
All the jurisdictional areas are within conservation lands.
So
no delineations have been done.
Yeah, there are no.
Right, so as a part of when I can't recall the name of the document the commission has to sign off on, that goes to the state for their final ruling as to the restriction itself. Pardon me for not recalling that, but certainly in that document, it's signed off by a commission on any particular piece of restricted land that's being taken over as such. There are amendments or provisions in there based on each particular parcel. So I guess my question is this related to all of those parcels? And does it tie back into those reports that are filed and provided to the Board of Selectmen and the town administrator?
Well, I don't think that pertains to any of the things that were.
Oh, well, then I guess my next question would be then why not just do an ANRAD out there?
Because I don't think we have the time and the energy to just delineate conservation.
No, just asking.
I was just going to say whether we can think
if
about.
If it's not a significantly large area, and I don't really know how much acreage
there's a lot of
wetlands
areas.
take up. I'm sorry?
It would be a large task and a lot.
It would be, okay.
Yeah, it's a lot.
I was going to say whether we have to come back to this, but whether there are issues like for Rafe's last comment of something like whether you just, right, whether the issue is we're worried about where things are disposed of, which is I see a problem often when even other groups do it, whether how much is just cutting it and leaving it relatively in place on the trail bed, whether there is a compromise for when people are there, that things can be at least cut up and left in place, so to speak, because we're concerned about where things are going to be moved to and how, whether at least the major work can be done on a more timely basis. I mean, some of this and just notifying us in real time, but I could see something where we just get that, whether we're more concerned about where it gets moved to than the fact that it's cut up and left in the trail bed and people could at least still get around. I think in most cases, it could be cut up and people could then get around it. Might be a little bit of a compromise.
Yeah, usually if it's something small, I mean, sometimes I'll just turn it so it's kind of lining the trail and helps delineate where the trail actually is.
Right.
So let's do this. We do have to move on because we have a notice of intent that we have to open the hearing on. So I'm, like I said before, I'm fine for us to try to figure out ways to allow you to do the work you need to do without too much impediment on the time front. I totally get that. And I do feel like the document we've got goes most of the way toward that, but there may be these exceptions that we should try to figure out. So I think, I mean, unless it's really urgent, I think we should try to stick it on our next agenda and keep going. Maybe leave a little bit more time for talking about it, you know, so that we can maybe try to find some middle ground that'll work for everybody. So.
The next agenda is out of the question, sorry.
Okay, well, I think tonight's agenda is already full. So I don't know where we would put it later tonight. Well, let's do this. Why don't we do this? We don't have to, it's not an NOI or an RDA, so we don't have to like nail the time down right now. Let's be in touch over the next couple days, figure out a time that'll work. We want to do it as soon as we can, because obviously spring's coming. You're going to want to do work, and we're going to want to help you do that. So let's just be in communication a little bit, find another time to talk about it as soon as we can, and then go forward. Okay? Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time.
It was a really good discussion. Thank you for bringing it.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.
All right. What's that, Kelly?
I just said, I'm leaving then.
Oh, okay. Bye, Kelly. Thank
Thanks
you.
a lot.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
All right, let's jump into our NOI hearing here. So notice is hereby given that the Conservation Commission of the Town of Sherborn will hold a virtual public hearing at 8 p.m. on the 1st of April, 2021. The hearing is held pursuant to Chapter 131, Section 40 of the General Laws as amended, the Wetland Protection Act, and the Sherborn Wetland Bylaw, Chapter 17, to consider a proposal by Ecotech on behalf of Elizabeth Morris to demolish and rebuild an existing barn at 15 Apple Street, Map 8 and Lot 13. Work is proposed within the buffer zone. This application is available for viewing by contacting the Sherborn Conservation Office. All persons desiring to be heard will be given an opportunity to speak at the hearing. Okay, who's going to present?
Arthur Allen from Ecotech.
Great, thank you, Arthur.
Hello. Again, Arthur Allen from Ecotech Incorporated, wetland scientist representing Elizabeth Morris. I believe Miss Morris, yeah, I see her on the call. Hello there. We haven't met personally.
Yeah. Nice to finally see what you look like.
Same here. So if I could share my screen, I could put up first a photo of the existing barn and location, and then the site plan.
Yeah, you should be able to. What's that?
Yeah, I just said please.
Oh.
All right. Let's see. So first,
There we go.
everyone can see that. That's a photo of the existing dilapidated barn that's proposed to be replaced. And as you can see, it's within a paddock area that's mowed. You can see the roof line has quite a dip to it, and there are quite a few other issues. The sills are gone, and but you can also see in this photo, I'm pointing, there's kind of basically piers at the corners and a sort of a footing or foundation along the edge. So just keep that in mind as we move into the plan. That the plan is to demolish and replace the barn on its existing footprint in the same location. It can't be really well determined until the barn is demolished how much work. We'd like to be able to reuse the footings and foundation, but they can't determine that completely until they remove the structure. So the proposal includes removing and replacing the footings in the same location as necessary. No change in grade is proposed. Any existing material will be stockpiled up gradient of the wetland temporarily and replaced, and then the disturbed areas will be loam and seeded, whether that's just from the equipment access or from actually having to dig out and remove the footings and foundation. Also, I'll point to this corner back here where my cursor is. There's about a 30-inch pine that's grown up since the barn was constructed. It's actually 10 feet off the barn. So the proposal is also to remove that pine when in between demolishing the existing barn and building the new one, to remove that pine, just flush cutting it to the ground without removing the stump. The pine is outside of the 50-foot buffer, again, with lawn around it. So that's the only vegetation disturbance other than temporary disturbance of the lawn around the barn as necessary to demolish and replace it. So I'll move next to the plan. And this is actually a plan that was provided to me today by the engineer. It's got a revision date of March 31st. The only change from between this plan and the plan that was filed is that the engineers extended the erosion control barrier. It comes right down now on the right side of the barn, below the barn. She originally had tied it into this existing retaining wall. She felt that the retaining wall was pretty much flush with the lawn in this project access area. So she decided to just extend that erosion barrier. It's a compost sock proposed, extend that above the wall. So between the wall and the project access out to the existing driveway to protect that whole area. So that's the only change on this revised plan. So again, access would be from the existing driveway and then down across this lawn area between the retaining walls and out to the barn within this paddock area. You can see my delineated wetland A series bordering vegetated wetland in the lower part of the plan. So A series flags here, and then we go up. There's the existing fence here and paddock area that surrounds, and then the erosion barrier is up well inside the fence and paddock and surrounds the work area. And then there's a proposed stockpile area up in this corner, about as far away from the wetland as possible, that still has access in the event they have to do any digging to remove and temporarily stockpile material if they have to remove the footings and foundation to replace those. So that's essentially the project. I know I would also mention we do have a DEP file number with no comments. The whole entire property falls within mapped rare species habitat. So as required, we provided the notice of intent and plan to Natural Heritage. I thought at the time I filed that this was an exempt activity. Natural Heritage, in their response letter dated March 31st, which I believe was provided to the commission, agreed that it's exempt and that it would, in their opinion, would have no impact on the habitat. So I believe that addresses all the issues I had, and I'd be glad to answer questions. I know the commission, at least some of you have been, and the agent have been out to the site. So if there's anything I can answer or Ms. Morris can answer, please go ahead.
Michael?
Michael, go ahead. I was going to suggest that Dave run through some of the points that, some of the more significant points on his application summary.
Sure, you can do that first. You have the floor, Dave.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Everything that Art had indicated and outlined on the plan is spot on. I'm very happy that he extended with conversation with the engineer, the erosion control going further towards the driveway. Keep in mind that the existing project is probably about 300 square feet. If you look at the center of, the left, the southwestern corner of the barn, that area within the buffer is probably about 300 square feet plus or minus. And you can see the 30-foot pine, which is gonna, well, it was discussed about whether or not it would be stumped down to the ground flush or whether or not we would leave it as a snag. That may be a discussion that the commission might want to have. You know, I saw some potential for wildlife value with that. The house was built, I believe, in 1955. It's on a 2-acre lot. The BVW is associated with an intermittent stream. There's a combination of cinnamon fern, sensitive fern, red maple, and certainly poison ivy out there. And the report, the dominance test that Art had provided is consistent with what I had seen out there. As far as the 19 flag Series A that Art had posted, I did some random samples at, I believe, 4 or 5 of them, and they came up clean for hydric. And I took them relatively close to where he had taken his samples, perhaps a few more upland. You can see the temporary stock area up in the, what is that, the northwest corner. That's where I don't know whether or not there'll be equipment for debris removal there, or whether or not that's just going to be a barren place where you would put any soils or organics that are found. And additionally, where you might be stockpiling the wood that's taken and the material that's taken from the existing barn. Those are just a couple of questions right there, Art, and then I'll just carry on with a few more observations.
Yeah, if I could through the chair, and I'll slide this over. So any, if there was to be a dumpster on the site, it would be located in the driveway area. It's the only solid surface where you could set a dumpster, and then material is planned to just be transported as they demolish it from the barn area out and placed in the dumpster for removal from the site. The stockpile area is proposed just to, if as needed, just for the soil to be excavated if they do end up having to remove and replace the piers and foundation. Again, they're hoping not to, but that is to be determined, and it was included in the proposal.
Sure, and Art, if you could just confirm what type of equipment you would be required to use out there.
Primarily, it would be an excavator and a small dump truck primarily, maybe a skid steer. That would be the extent of it.
How do you feel about any more extensive sedimentation barriers? I realize that you've got the erosion control pretty much around the southern and eastern perimeters of this. Is there any value to adding any additional controls if we have to replace the existing footings?
I don't believe so. I mean, I think we've provided, the engineer I think has provided adequate working area, and it's pretty level out there in that area that's cordoned off by the erosion siltation control. So I don't believe that's necessary. I mean, certainly if there's any issue, I mean, if the commission would prefer to see additional, but I don't feel it's necessary in that area.
There are no gutters anticipated on this new project?
No, it would just sheet off onto the lawn the way it does now. And as you could see from the site in the photo, it's not causing any erosion at this point. Again, because it's vegetated and it's relatively level out there around the barn.
Yeah, I agree with you. There was no evidence of erosion or potential sedimentation or consequential turbidity. So as such, with no gutters, there's really no point discharges per se.
Right.
Yeah, I did some GIS work myself, and I'm sure Art did as well. He presented some of that in the NOI. But the natural discharge patterns flow overland in a southwesterly manner. So if you want to just take the cursor and go southwest, direction from the barn to a wetland, which is, and also to the left as well. And that joins up on an intermittent stream across the street and some ways away. I confirmed that, let's see, we didn't confirm whether or not any non-project related organic matter, which are set up in piles, which currently provide some value from a wildlife habitat standpoint, whether or not they should be eliminated. Personally, I didn't see a significant issue with that, but that's up to the commission to decide. Yeah, We have not discussed I thought about using some type of matting, matting material along the project access point, going from left to right, but having the additional erosion control put up there, I don't think matting is necessary. But again, that's something the commission may or may not want to think about. If I can get confirmation, the approximate square footage of the barn itself is approximately 1,270 square feet.
Sounds about right.
Just a few more items and then I'll carry on. Yeah, I reviewed, photographs of the property going back, easily a decade, and the driveway and that access area have been certainly used going back in time for sure. And keep in mind that 300 square feet of this area is within the 50-foot buffer, and that's a part of the existing barn in the lower left-hand corner. That's all I have for now, unless you have questions.
Michael?
My only points on the, if the project seems fairly straightforward, I guess it's only some of the issue to just nail down any issue around the, right, there was no, if they don't plan to have gutters, I don't know if any work was done. They had gutters in the past. I don't know if any work was done to see where those drains go to, or whether they'll be closed off as part of the project. And whether we just have a condition that, just in the past, it looks like they did have gutters, but the only question is whether there's just a condition that says that something would have to be done if, if we see any signs of erosion from the just sheeting off the roof before the certificate of compliance. So if they don't want to have gutters, it's just a matter of whether to close off the two, I guess, drains that are present there. So that's the only issue. And the other one is just this resolving the issue of whether I think it would be nice to have a snag for that 30-foot pine. It's in jurisdiction. It would be nice to sort of have that out. And so that wouldn't be a safety factor. It's just a matter of working that out. Otherwise, except for those two issues, I'm fine with the erosion control and all the other parts of the project.
I had the same comment as Michael about the gutters. So I know we looked and it doesn't look like there's any erosion right now, but there used to be gutters not that long ago. So that could, that could make it look like, oh, everything's stable. But if now we're going to have water sheeting off the roof, that's something to take into consideration if it was going elsewhere before.
Maybe if I could, through the chair, maybe we could ask Miss Morris if she prefers to have gutters. I mean, I
guess we would prefer to have gutters. I feel like the sheeting, we would, risk having erosion if we didn't. Michael, you asked us to try to figure out where those downspouts went. And so we did put a hose down into it, and it definitely is open. I mean, the water doesn't come back up, so it goes somewhere. We couldn't find anywhere out in the wetlands where it looked like it went. I guess we're presuming it must be a dry well somewhere in the paddock that, they probably built a dry well. But I guess we would prefer to have gutters, but you guys tell us if you think, I don't know, would risking erosion or, having water go into a dry well be worse? I don't know what would be preferable.
We do know that once when the guttering got blocked, there was flooding off the roof and it eroded about a 2-foot area on that back corner. I guess it's the southwest corner. It eroded about 2 feet of soil there very rapidly. So we know that if there's runoff off the roof, it does cause erosion. So the gutters actually do have an effect.
Yeah, I mean, my feeling is whatever the history of it is, that's what we want to try to mimic. And so if there have been gutters and if you have a dry well, then it's going to infiltrate into the ground there, and then that's going to serve the hydrology of the wetlands because it'll get down into the wetlands from there.
Yeah.
So I think I'd rather see that than not see it.
And then Michael, tell me more for if we want to leave a stump on that pine, what would be the optimal height to create a habitat?
I don't think there's anything optimal except for the more the merrier.
Okay.
Having just done it myself on a similar thing where I left about 25 or 30 feet, but not everybody leaves.
Yeah.
But it just depends what I think any of those kind of heights doesn't. I don't think you have to worry about it falling down on anything really.
Yeah.
No,
We're just
actually,
limited by
the
safety.
bottom 25 feet actually slope away from the barn, and then it goes up at a slightly different angle. So a 25-foot piece would be perfect.
And then it defined it itself.
Okay. Any other concerns from the commission? Cindy?
I have a question for clarification. Well, one at least. So I thought I heard Art say that the dumpster would be in the driveway, but when we went there on Saturday, I thought I saw a dumpster right where it says lawn on the lawn.
Yeah, we were planning to put it on the driveway, but when the dumpster guy came, I guess he I don't know, it ended up there. It was flat and he felt comfortable that he could get the dumpster there. It's not on the septic, it's far enough away from everything. It's closer to the barn for them to be able to load everything directly from, when they're the demolition, load directly from the barn into the dumpster. And so
That means the other thing about it is it's straight up those stairs that are on. You can see up where the stairs are marked on there. It's straight up from there, and it means that when they're traipsing backwards and forwards, they're only going up and down those stairs onto a very dry lawn, and they won't be using the access way for movement. So
okay, so the dumpster that I saw on the lawn is the dumpster that would have been on the driveway, but will no longer be on the driveway. It's actually on the lawn.
Correct.
Great. Okay. And then I know we had sort of talked briefly about horses and whether or not you might have horses at the barn after it was finished. What were your thoughts around that?
we're going to put 2 stalls in there. And I guess we'll decide in the future whether we'll actually use them for horses. It's an area, the paddock is quite small. I know that you are a horse person. The paddock is quite small. There's no access to trails from there. So for us, we have no children anymore. We don't ride anymore. And so I think for us, we don't expect to have horses in the very near future.
Cindy, did you want to just make them aware about the manure issues and stuff? Is that the concern for the future? Maybe just to give them a heads up.
Right. So
storage.
Well, I just didn't know if you were going to have horses, where you would pasture them, and if you thought about pasturing them somewhere, getting the horses out of the 50-foot, the no alteration zone, right where the current paddock is, actually.
Right, but they're not. It's not part of the proposal that you're going to have horses, correct? So I mean, I think if you were to want to have horses there, you'd have to come back before us anyway, and we would talk about those kinds of issues, I think.
And I guess so Courtney was getting at what the concern is, and the concern is just for pollution of the groundwater. We have a groundwater falls under the bylaw, and it's just concern about manure getting into the groundwater, which ends up feeding into our, well, not aquifers necessarily, but yes, into the water that we all drink. So there's just a concern around that and trying to protect that.
Yeah, so there's a groundwater protection bylaw. It's chapter 21 of the general bylaws, and The commission actually is an enforcer of that bylaw, and it's very specific about if you are planning to house livestock, that manure has to be contained in a very specific way, and ideally it would be contained outside of our buffer zone entirely. But then there's also the issue of if in the future horses did come to this property, the area that's a paddock right now would pretty easily, the vegetation would get, eliminated from heavy use of that area. So that's a concern. So I think you're not asking for permission to have horses there, but I think it would be something, as Neil said, for either you or somewhere down the line, a future owner would have to come back to us and talk about housing livestock.
Yeah, okay, we understand.
Great. All right, what other issues? Are there any other issues?
I just want to comment something that is not really an issue regarding the order of conditions, but I noticed that you were both really happy about the wetlands and the health of the wetlands. And along the driveway, you have a beautiful strip of Pachysandra. And I just wanted to alert you that that can be quite invasive, and that as it goes closer to the road, I noticed it was starting to invade down into the wetlands. So this wouldn't be something that would be in our order of conditions necessarily, but I just wanted to alert you that if you want to keep that wetlands healthy and knowing that it's a rare habitat, you might want to figure out some ways to keep that from happening.
Yeah, no, that's agreed. That the Pachysandra was there before us. It's very aggravating. It's a huge amount of work to try to. I don't know quite how to contain it, but thank you.
So I just want to deal with the practicality because we were sort of running short on time, and I don't think we have yet a draft order of conditions for this project. But I'm wondering if my fellow commissioners feel comfortable enough with what we've talked about for us to close the hearing, potentially at least draft or sketch out. I mean, we're out of time right now. So I'm just trying to think procedurally what the best thing to do is. I'd like to close the hearing tonight unless there's something else that people still have unanswered. But I'm just not sure how to get through at least drafting conditions so that everybody's on the same page.
I think we could close the hearing. I think we could also vote to approve, and then we could, with the understanding that we would approve the order of conditions at the next meeting.
So are you comfortable with that because you feel like the conditions are going to be pretty simple? It's not a complex project, so it's not going to be anything controversial.
That's how I feel.
Okay. What do the other commissioners think?
I agree.
Me too.
Okay. All right. Okay. In that case, I move that we close the hearing.
Second.
Great. Any other discussion? Oh, Michael?
Normally before we close the hearing, just to be a little simpler, we just go over any major conditions, even though we're going to come up with them later, just to make sure that but I don't think there's any surprises in this one, because I don't think, other than erosion control and watching out for the gutters and the tree snag, I think we're basically, I guess that's really it. So maybe I've already done it as part of the discussion. So I will leave it at that since there's no surprises there.
Okay. While we're in this discussion moment, does anybody else have any other things beside the three things Michael just articulated in terms of conditions? Okay. All right. Thank you, Michael. All right. So
I'm sorry. I don't want to launch into a long discussion, but I think one of the conditions also ought to be something about wetland boundary markers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So we're going to ask you to put up some boundary markers it's always for you and for anybody else who might own the house in the future, just to know where the wetlands are. So we'll come up with some reasonable number and design. So, okay. Thank you for that. All right. Any other discussion? Okay. All those in favor, Cindy?
Aye.
Neil, aye. Jean?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Courtney,
Aye.
Carol,
Aye.
Jessica?
She's muted.
Yes, she is. She may not be unmuting. Okay. 6-0, the motion passes. So do we want to, I guess we can, is it a motion? I just always forget just procedurally what the best way to do it. Is it a motion that we're going to approve the project with the conditions to be written, but as we agreed during the discussion? So I move that we approve this project with the conditions as drafted, which will be finalized and voted on at the next meeting.
And as discussed during this meeting.
Yes, sorry, I thought I said that, but yes, as discussed in this meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? Michael?
Once we approve it with the thing there, it's not clear that we need to vote on the order of conditions per se, as opposed to we can issue it next time. I mean, we could try to do that, but I'm saying it's generally.
Right. Well, I think I'm moving that we approve the project.
Okay.
And then
fine.
sort of
I'll
adding the language about the conditions just to be sort of
Okay.
redundant potentially. Okay.
Oh, it's the appeal period ends and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, go on.
Right. Okay.
just-
Yep. Dave, go ahead.
Procedurally, Mr. Chair, I may be incorrect, but I may have should have spoken up sooner. Would it have been reasonable to just continue the hearing instead of closing it out so that we don't run into any problems with the appeal period potentially, even though the order isn't available, plus having the order done in its completion by the next time we meet?
So does the appeal period start from when the conditions are accepted or when the hearing is closed?
Well,
I thought it started, Art probably knows better, but I thought it started from when the order was issued.
That's correct. When
That's
the
correct.
the date of issuance of the order.
Okay, so then we're not, I understand what you're saying, that ideally we would wait, but I just, because I felt like this was a fairly straightforward one, but I understand what you're saying, so. Okay. All right, any other discussion? Okay, Cindy,
Aye.
Neil, aye, Jean,
Aye.
Michael,
Aye.
Courtney,
Aye.
Carol,
Aye.
and Jessica.
This is on the approval of the project, right?
Yes. Okay, Jessica?
I said aye. I'm not sure if you heard. Aye.
Oh, sorry, thank you.
No
Okay.
worries.
All right, so we will put together a draft order. We will circulate that to Art and the Morrises, and I think it'll be it'll have to be the next meeting. We'll get together, we'll just finalize the conditions and we'll issue the order.
I mean,
Very good.
ideally also, Neil,
Yep.
if we could circulate the draft to Art and the applicants ahead of time in case they had any.
That's what I meant. Yes,
Right.
not only to us, but yes,
That's
to them
what I
as well.
heard.
Yes, okay, great. All right,
Thanks
thank you,
for your
everybody.
time.
All right,
Okay,
thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks,
much.
Thank you.
Morris.
Have a good night.
Art, thank you.
thank you. All righty, wonderful. Moving on. Sorry we're a little bit late, 3 Oldfield folks, but welcome. Okay, so we've circulated a draft. We got some comments back from Mr. Brodsky representing the applicant. I made some, yes, Cindy?
I think, do I need to recuse myself?
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
so I'm recusing myself as an abutter.
Okay, we'll see you soon. Thank you. Okay, so, right, so comments from Mr. Brodsky, comments from me. That draft got circulated to the rest of the commission, with the comments this morning. Hold on, let me just get it out and then.
I'm fine. I just have my hand up. Just keep going.
Okay, wonderful. I just feel pressure to recognize
Oh,
you.
sorry.
All right. So anyway, so basically that draft has been put in the Dropbox and circulated to everybody on the commission this morning. And that's what we're here to discuss and finalize and vote on the approval and all the rest of that stuff. So Jean? Your
Yes,
hands down.
sir. Mr. Chairman, I have to point out that I made a mistake, a slight mistake, when I forwarded the draft order to Mr. Brodsky. It did not include the changes that I made based on the comments from Mr. Garner. So at the beginning of this discussion, and they were, for the most part, it was wordsmithing, but perhaps I should run through the comments that Mr. Garner made that I agreed should be part of the order.
That sounds good. My only question for you is there's 3 orders in Dropbox. Which one is the
It's
one
the
that we're
first
working?
file that has my initials at the end after I put in some other missing edits that were there on your top of yours. You'll see
I
it
don't
has the
see
CL.
anything. I don't see anything. Oh, there it is. I see it now.
I
Okay.
could
Can we have that
I
up
could
on the
share it or you
screen,
could share it. What?
please?
What's that?
Can somebody pull that up on the screen, please?
Should I do it or you're going to do it?
I'll do it because I'm right here. Hold on. Just give me 1 second to get it oriented correctly, and then I'll do it.
Mr. Kessler, just for the record, this is Adam Brodsky representing Robin Stahl. I just want to let you know that Patrick Garner, our professional wetland scientist, is also attending this evening, as is Ms. Stahl.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Can everybody see that?
Can you scroll down just to see if it's the right one a little bit? Okay, yeah, that's the one. Okay.
Okay. All right. So what do we want to do? Well, if you don't mind, I'll just ask, Mr. Brodsky, obviously I put some edits in there and I just wanted to, this is the part where I'm confused. Michael, are your edits after my edits?
They're after your, yeah, they're in blue and they're after your edits because they were edits I had made a month ago, but didn't get into the version.
Okay. Are there a lot of them or?
No, you'll see it's all in there. Just a few
Okay.
clarifying wordsmithing things. Nothing that significant except where we had to play around with the, never mind, you'll see them. They're not substantive in much ways.
Mr. Kessler, just so you know, I don't think that I've seen this draft, nor has Pat, and I'm having a difficulty actually seeing the edits on my laptop, given the size. So I don't know if it's possible to blow them up, please.
Yes, tell me when it's big enough for you to see.
Thank you, sir.
Is that good?
Yes.
Okay. So are you saying you haven't seen my or Michael's edits? Because I thought Gene sent that to you.
No, I have the draft with your edits, Mr. Kessler.
Okay, all right.
I just haven't seen Mr. Lesser's edits, that's all.
Then let me get to where they are so you can see those. It looks like these ones in blue.
You can go to the very beginning, go up a little.
Starts at the first page, Neil.
What's that? Oh, sorry, I thought it was at the
There.
first page. There we are.
So I'm fine with all those edits, and I'm pointing out also that based on the comment from Mr. Brodsky, the last sentence of the first paragraph is crossed out, and I agree with that.
Yeah. And just so for the benefit of the commission, the only two, there were 2 areas that Mr. Brodsky had pointed out. One was he wanted to include a disclaimer that the applicant did not agree necessarily with the statement that the facts presented in the timeline, and he wanted to make sure that that by signing the order or accepting the order that his applicant was not admitting that was accurate, and I was fine with that. I did a little bit of tweaking on some language, just sort of put it in the context of the applicant contending versus us asserting and that kind of stuff. And then the other area was just something where he was saying that he thought it was just sort of more commentary than it was beneficial. And I have my reasons for wanting it in there. So since it was doing no harm, I just asked that it remain, and I'll show that stuff to you. But
and Mr. Kessler, we generally agreed with your version of the document. I just want to let you know that.
Okay, great, thank you. That's one of the questions I was going to ask you. Okay, have you had ample opportunity to read these blue comments here or these blue changes here?
Yes, sir. I have no comments, and I don't know if Mr. Garner has any concerns.
Yeah, Adam, I'll note for what it's worth that I have seen both versions.
Excellent.
Who knows why or how, but I've seen them both, and I had no issues with either the comments Neil had made are the blue comments that were added afterwards.
In that case, we can move quickly through these because Pat is as experienced, if not more experienced than am I reviewing orders of conditions.
The
Okay.
only thing here and what he's showing on the screen now is that I undeleted the beginning of D and made a few blue edits to, I think, make it a little clearer. And then I did not undelete A and B, which obviously we can do now.
Right.
So, but you could see what, and Neil, you could see yourself, I thought it would
Yes.
make it more straightforward.
Yeah, and that's fine. I'm fine with your changes, and I had asked that the stuff remains, so we'll just we'll undelete those two, and that's I think that's fine with everybody. So next page, I don't see any changes, and obviously, commissioners, if you have any other comments that aren't in here, please point it out. This is the disclaimer I was talking about, and you can see I added just two things here. The owner contends, just to make it clear that that's the case. And then here's just a just striking of a word from Michael. Please stop me if you need me to stop anywhere.
Wait, can you go back to the word that was
Struck?
struck
Yes,
seasonally?
yes. This was from the old condition where we had seasonal use. Of
Right, we did away with that.
Longer, and that was with this change, we no longer have that issue.
Mr. Garner asked that we delete seasonally and suggested that we use and seasonal use.
Correct.
Where? Say that again? Oh.
He suggested that we delete seasonally, but he replaced it with seasonal use and seasonal use.
Okay, so and seasonal use of the North Paddock. But I thought we did away with the seasonality of the use.
Yeah, I thought we had two, that we had let it remain as a year-round use and
Okay,
not seasonal.
I'm just repeating what you sent to me, Pat. But
Yeah, sorry for the confusion. That was.
Yeah, no,
that was not
I
our
think,
intent.
right, and I think it is a holdover from the old order. Okay. Next is these things.
All I did here was the fact that the old condition number 2 was two different issues altogether. So I separated them into two separate issues.
Okay. I think it's fine. Okay. Here's some just renumbering and channel change to stream.
No, it's also, well, yeah,
Oh.
we had nothing wrong there. The buffer, it was not a buffer zone. It was a resource area.
Oh, okay. Okay. Some renumbering.
Can you go back, I'm sorry, Neil, can you go back to the area of conditions 13, 14, 15? Jurisdictional area. So we're deleting what was originally condition 14 and it applied to mowing in the right of way. We're taking that
Yes.
out. Yes, okay.
Yes. That was from Mr. Brodsky.
I want to ask Pat about the condition that starts with the words "a wetland scientist."
Yes.
Pat, you had suggested that instead of writing twice per year during periods of flow, that we use an expression, at least one inspection shall occur during stream flow.
Correct.
Shall we change it to that?
Give me a moment to read what we have now.
Yeah, I'm sorry about this.
So,
Okay,
sorry, I
I can
thought
skip
this had Pat's edits. It doesn't?
No, it doesn't.
That's what
That's
she
what
said.
But you're pointing out what they are as we're going.
That's right.
Okay, fine. As long as we cover it, I don't care.
I think the way it's crafted now is perfectly fine.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay. What else, Gene? From him. If you want to just stop me, I'm just kind of rolling, looking for Michael's.
I'm getting lost in the papers here.
You can always come back while you're looking.
Yes.
Oh, there's another one, just one more. It's condition 11. Now it's some other condition. Condition 12. At the very end, Pat suggested that at the end of the last sentence, the effectiveness of the cover should be checked after every rainstorm, and Pat added greater than a half an inch or over a 12-hour period.
That's fine.
Correct. And yeah, I would still stand by that because this is very ambiguous.
Yeah. Okay,
Every rainstorm is.
Oh, no, it's it's clear.
Well, yeah, we'll add that.
Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. Anything else before, let's say?
So that's the last one from me.
Okay. All right. And then I think this is all, me or Mr. Brodsky. So we've all sort of had that discussion. We took this out, not a problem. And that's it,
You just
except
have
for
to roll
the
it off.
numbering revisions at the bottom. Okay. Any other comments from anybody? Great. All right. Blah, 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 blah. So should I just read off the findings?
Can I suggest to limit it to just 2 findings? You okay with that?
Limit it just to what?
Just 2 findings. The ones that the ones that are identified as finding I and J.
Okay. Yeah, well, I wouldn't want to read all of that, would I?
Let's see, hold on. Yeah, the commission hereby finds, and I and J, I think, are sufficient.
Okay. All right, so the commission hereby finds that the proposed proposal presented in the NOI SLB 20-2 and
Sorry, Neil, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but shouldn't this be part of the motion to approve, subject to the following findings?
Yeah, although sort of procedurally, we often, well, I don't know, sometimes we read the findings as not part of the motion, but that's fine. I move that the commission hereby finds that the proposal presented in the NOI SLB 20-2 and associated documents to daylight and intermittent stream channel restore a vegetated wetland that will be planted with native species and not subject to grazing. Use the north paddock as a horse pasture to be grazed and managed using best practices for pastures as outlined in the horse management plan will minimize adverse impacts to jurisdictional areas subject to conditions below. The commission further finds that while the restoration proposed in the NOI 10,067 square feet is not equal in area to the unauthorized alteration described in section F, it will improve on existing conditions and improve on the conditions that would have resulted from the previous order of conditions. All right, so the Sherborn Conservation Commission hereby finds that the proposed project is approved subject to the findings and conditions contained herein and discussed tonight.
Second.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor, Jean?
Aye.
Neil, aye. Michael?
Aye.
Courtney?
Aye.
Carol?
Aye.
Jessica?
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. Okay, I guess at this point we just need to clean this up, get the final order set up and filed, yes?
That's correct.
Fantastic. All right, well, I think that's it.
I have a procedural question, if I may.
Please.
At this point, I know you just have to clean this up and everybody has to sign it. Is it mailed to Robinstall or does the commission let her know when it can be picked up somewhere? How are you dealing with OOCs?
I would, I'm not sure how Elizabeth does it, but she's not here. So I suggest that it get emailed and simultaneously mailed by certified mail and that it's issued once the email gets sent. Perfect.
Okay, good. That works for us. Thank you.
Great. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. And be looking forward to seeing a new wetland growing up over there.
We'll let you know when it happens.
Fantastic. Thank you both.
Adam,
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Adam, we're going to get something from you officially notifying us that the appeal has been withdrawn.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, that's what I was just going to address. So first, I want to thank everyone. This was a very creative solution to a difficult problem, and we're grateful for all your efforts. Yes, I mean, once the order is issued and the 10-day appeal period passes, and so the order is final, I'll work with town council to file a stipulation of dismissal of the pending appeal.
Great.
And Adam, did you ascertain whether or not the prior order had been recorded?
I did look into that. I candidly do not recall at this hour the answer to the question, but I did have the answer at one point.
Okay.
So you think we're good to go?
It's been a long week with at least one more day to go.
Okay. Well, let's do this. You're going to reach out to town council. I will also let town council know what transpired tonight, and we should be able to just procedurally tie this off.
Yes, if the order was recorded, we'd likely come in with a COC that no work was performed or something to that effect to make sure that we have a nice, clean title. But I'll look into it tomorrow and report back.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Night. Good night and good luck.
All right. Let's see. So we do have Coolidge Crossing on at 9 o'clock. It is no longer an NOI hearing. So I think we can, and we do have Todd and Roy McDowell here. So I think we can just sort of enter into the discussion just about it, as long as everybody is comfortable with it. It's 4 minutes away anyway. So I'm hoping everybody on the commission is aware that the NOI was withdrawn because of the issue with this ruling, this recent SJC ruling, and wanting to be safer than sorry that, that procedurally that the comprehensive permit is issued before the NOI application is submitted. So I think we just had a couple things we were going to talk about tonight, right? Like one being the commission was going to talk a little bit about submitting, potentially a letter to ZBA, but we also had a request from the applicant about whether we'd be willing to either waive the fee the second time or just essentially apply the fee that's already been submitted with the application to the next time that the NOI is filed. And so those are sort of the topics I think we should cover tonight.
Well, I could just make a motion that we recycle the fee that's already been deposited to be used when the next NOI is filed. That's a motion.
I would second that. I
Okay.
like the use of the word recycle.
All right, and then on the in discussion, I would just ask the applicant if that's acceptable to them.
Very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Of course. All right. Any other discussion? Okay. All those in favor, Jean?
Aye.
Neil, aye. Courtney?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Cindy?
Aye.
Carol?
Aye.
And Jessica?
Aye.
All right. The motion passes. So that is fine. We're all set there.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Let's see. In terms of the letter, we have that. And then we had, I think Carol and Michael did some editing on a draft that Dave had circulated a few days back. I will confess to not having looked at the edits because they came fairly late, but do we want to put it up on the screen and talk about it? How do we want to go at it? Michael?
I guess before we get to the specifics of a letter, I don't know if anybody's read what I sent as a result of the ZBA meeting.
Yeah,
last night.
I think that maybe we should talk about that first before the letter.
Okay, let's do it.
Essentially, we have to me, it was a somewhat, since we don't do many 40Bs and they're so far apart, I think we possibly weren't, that we'd have to, that I think I came to a new understanding last night as to how the 40B works with regard to our bylaw. Essentially what the letter, we had talked about a letter just talking about issues in the project, but what the letter really has to address is the concern about, not a concern, has to address the waivers that are requested to the local bylaw. in the original comprehensive permit application, where they're essentially, as I sent in the email, requesting waivers from the entire bylaw and the regulations. And not only do we have to, but the sort of expanded understanding that I think I might have learned is that it's not only an issue of saying what we feel about those waivers, but it means that if there are any conditions that we want that are based on our bylaw versus the state, I'll step back and say, we can have the NOI process is still going to come, and that would be based on the State Wetlands Protection Act. But if we have any conditions that are tied to our bylaw or based in our bylaw, that's where we would have to make the arguments now to the ZBA about the rationale and the reason for having such conditions that are based on the local regulations, and that the ZBA is the one that would include those conditions in their permit. And that is separate from whatever conditioning we might do as part of the NOI process under the Wetlands Protection Act. That was a little bit different than not having waivers, and then we can include some of those issues when we do the NOI. But I think that all of the local bylaw issues would have to be covered as part of the ZBA process. And I'll even ask the Roy or Todd whether, or Eric, is also here, whether that's the same understanding that they came away with.
As you know, we've asked for a waiver of the local bylaws, and that's our position at the moment. I think what we'd like to do is, once you have a letter put together for the ZBA, if we could have that shared with us, so we have an understanding of what your thoughts are, would be very helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, and Michael, if I can just sort of add on to what you're saying, that's my understanding as well. We could, because in theory, the ZBA could not grant the waiver, and then it would be sort of incumbent upon the applicant to argue why they need the waiver, or why it's economically infeasible not to have the waiver. And so I think it goes along with what you're saying, which is the ZBA can impose any kind of conditions that they want in a project like that. And if we make recommendations for certain conditions that may be rooted in our local bylaw or local regulations, we can certainly do that, and ZBA can decide whether they want to include it as a condition or not. And then it goes, like I said, it goes into the process of what the applicant, whether they're willing to, have that condition or not, and back and forth. So I agree with your sort of latest assessment.
Okay. If we have that, then the issue is separate from pointing out all the issues in the project. The question is what specific conditions might we want, conditioning that we'd want to have the ZBA make as part of under the bylaw related issues, versus what we would leave to the NOI process that would come later. And to the extent that we need some support or technical work done on that, there is the issue of using the ZBA peer review process, which they have somebody under contract to support if we need some work done in terms of defining some conditions. And then the other issue related to that, and that's, they didn't rule out the fact that if we somehow told them that we didn't think that their current peer reviewer was adequate to do it, whether they would have to contract out again to somebody else, even though that would be time consuming and there was a new learning curve. That's an issue we will deal with our own later with the NOI. We have our own separate process there that we already moved forward on to some extent. But then the issue now for us, I think, is what aspects of this project we're in a disadvantage. That new Supreme Court ruling sort of rules out doing things simultaneously so that we're well informed on a project at the same time as that we're trying to make suggestions to the ZBA. the lawyer for the Supreme Court case was actually at the meeting last night and argued that without having the ZBA specifics done, then the Concom would know exactly what the project is well enough to find. I don't find that argument particularly
Well,
persuasive, but we don't have, it is what it is.
yeah, I mean, we're basically, yeah, we're at the point where we need to figure out if there are particular conditions or pieces of the local bylaw that we think that should be inserted. Jean, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I'm just trying to pull this all together in my head. And Michael, you touched on the point I'm about to make just a moment ago. So this is not an evaluation under the NOI process, but I'm thinking about leaning on the expertise of the consultant that we had already agreed to hire to assist us with evaluating the NOI. So as opposed to, so this would not be asking the applicant to fund that review of the documents before the ZBA?
No,
We couldn't.
It's all under the ZBA peer review process. And we can make a request that we want certain help from their peer reviewer, or that we can make a strong enough case. That might be a little bit difficult, depending on what the issues are, to say that we want the ZBA to hire a different consultant. Was not ruled out, but it was said that they would have to make a particularly strong case to do that. I would say we could come back to that depending on what issues we think are that we want to have information about. So I would, and whether, or what work we need done to support making case before the ZBA for something that's related to the bylaw versus being left to dealing with this all as part of the NOI process.
Right, and sorry, Michael, I would add that, yeah, we cannot use the firm that we were going to use for the NOI, because unless we were to find an alternative funding source. So we could either, as Michael's saying, we could ask ZBA to, use the same mechanism to hire a third-party consultant for specific wetland issues. But yes, I think I agree with Michael. I think it might be a tough road to hoe only because of where we are in the process, but we could certainly ask. It's not, the hearing is open and we could certainly ask. But otherwise, yes, we might have to rely on Tetra Tech, their peer reviewer, to try to get some of that information. I mean, I have a sort of, in a very broad sense, I have the things that I worry a little bit about from a wetland protection perspective that I would want to kind of pass along to ZBA, and incursions in the 50-foot and what that might do to the wetlands that are surrounding. And the other is stormwater system and how that's changing the hydrology of wetlands and that kind of stuff. But I think it's a tough thing to do without that expertise.
Well, it comes back to whether there are specific conditions that, I mean, it's probably, I don't know whether we'd end up being able to do the same conditions under the NOI process. In any case.
You can't rely on your local regulations or bylaw to do it. That's the issue.
Right, but the question is whether there's enough
in the WPA
issues in terms of landscape plan or I mean, for example, the stormwater management stuff is really state anyway. And so our concerns are that.
Yes, but what they're doing now with the stormwater management system at the ZBA is the peer reviewer looks at it, says, does it meet the performance standards for stormwater management under WPA? It does, right? The peer reviewer already said it. So from the perspective of those performance standards at the state level, there doesn't appear to be an issue. For me, my concern is how does the infiltration of stormwater change the hydrology of wetlands, which is not part of the performance standards in the State Act, but we have our own sort of presumptions of significant adverse impact when there's alterations within the 50-foot that might cover something like that, whereas at the state level, there's not a whole lot to hang your hat on in terms of concern.
Well, I think at the state level, you could still say that, right, whether there's enough changes in the hydrology, that it is an impact on the wetlands and that,
Yep.
and it's a negotiated, and it's even at any level, it's somewhat qualitative, and it's a matter of working out with the applicant. What
Yeah,
possible changes
or
could be
it's
done.
quantitative, but so complex that it's like, it's monumental to really nail down the specifics of.
I mean, let's pursue that issue. For example, right now, the issue is whether there was probably a possibly difference of opinion in last night's meeting between the fact that the peer reviewer acknowledged the fact that, right, they would do a bit more work in a different way if they were trying to look at issues of trying to lessen the burden on the buffer zone. And that's something that we could, in a letter, request that the peer reviewer continue the review of the stormwater to see whether stormwater management, to see whether there are measures that could be done or changes that could be done that would lessen the significant burden on the buffer zone. And to some extent in the inner, in the no alteration zone, since there's a lot of significant grading and detention, and there's some detention basins there, but a lot of it is in the buffer zone. And whether there are some measures that I would suggest that in a letter that we ask the peer reviewer to look into certain measures that could maybe lessen the impact on the buffer zone and thereby lessen the burden of the possible impact, the impacts on the wetlands. And so that's a specific case where I think we could try, that we could include in a letter there and that they could see what they come up with. I mean, when this has been brought up before in front of them of whether to decrease the amount of impervious space, whether it's either changing the number of parking spots or the size of the parking spots. And I had issues about whether there's more porous or permeable, however you want to call it, asphalt or other kind of things that might, and to know whether that could make a significant difference in what is in the buffer zone. There's been willingness to do that. It's been considered I think of not wording, I think using their, I guess the applicant's consultant, right, that it's tweaking of the system, whereas I wasn't clear to me whether that it could lead to more significant changes than just simply tweaking, so that it would, and it would be just nice to get to the bottom of that. So that would be one area that I think in a letter that we would ask them to pursue that work. As to another area that I would bring up, as I put in the draft of issues, is whether the landscaping plan, which here is a significant amount of work in the buffer zone, and whether the landscaping plan at this point is fairly general. And this would come up again in the NOI anyway, but whether this would be a time, whether at what point we ask the ZBA to make a condition that the landscaping plan is, given that it's in a lot of the inner buffer zone that was unaltered, and that it's much more conditioned towards wildlife habitat and sort of filtration of any kind of water and things like that. So it's more key to water quality protection, interests of the Wetland Protection Act and our bylaw, and that whether the landscape plan should be fleshed out in more detail now or in some general guidelines about the fact that it's much more tuned into wetland protection than possibly a standard landscaping plan for whatever other purposes or just certain kind of visual effects for residents or the developer. So that's another area where I think that there could be there could be maybe some work done here as well as when it gets to the NOI that we could ask them about. And so it's a matter of what kind of conditioning that the ZBA would be willing to do about that kind of landscaping in jurisdictional areas. Trying to think of it in terms of other stuff. I mean, we have one of the bigger issues we have is what then is also wildlife habitat, and the fact that basically the buffer zone has is largely being altered, and there's a disconnect between two wetland areas. I'm not quite sure what mitigation options there are for that. That could be-
Tunnels.
What? Oh, tunnels.
Tunnels.
Well, I mean, one question I would ask about that was something I added to the letter. I mean, it would seem like one advantage of being involved with the ZBA process earlier on is there could be some discussion about the scale and scope of certain aspects of the development as a whole. I think I'm recalling many years ago with Whitney Farm that there was a lot of discussion about that, about, how many units there would be, where they would be. They left a long kind of vista, a street vista across wetlands. So there was a fair amount of negotiation discussion with the town for that one about the actual placement of buildings, how many buildings, where the driveways were. And I do think that's one advantage of providing the Conservation Commission input earlier in the process, that ZBA has the opportunity to know that, so that they haven't gone through their entire process of, figuring, agreeing or coming to some kind of consensus on what the development should look like without taking all of this into account. Because otherwise, then we're just trying to condition whatever we're left with,
So do other commission members or Dave, do you have any input on what we're talking about? I feel like we're sort of halfway into what ought to go in the letter. So, I don't care that it bleeds across, but just want to get any other input people want to have, or frankly, anybody in attendance can, by all means, chime in. But
if I just have a quick
Dave,
comment, if I could, thank you.
Please.
Thus far, we've collectively tried to put together a draft, which I've gotten some good input from most of you, no doubt. But on the other hand, we're thinking about going through the ZBA to work with their peer reviewer, if I'm not mistaken, hearing you correctly, to put together the draft based on the science that they come up with, based on what they reviewed on the comprehensive permit.
Correct.
Yeah, yes, that's true.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Do other commissioners have any input at this point? Or anybody else, frankly, in attendance? I mean, let me just say a couple things, and then we can, anybody else can chime in for sure. There's a part of me that says we can sit down and talk about the specifics. And Michael, you clearly thought about this more than I have, if I'm honest about it. But I think that, well, here's a question I want to ask. Do we want to try to either reach out to the peer reviewer or talk to ZBA about hiring a third-party consultant specifically for, it would really be a similar function to what we're talking about with, what we would have done as part of the NOI process. That we would just, and frankly, if we were going to do it, I would suggest we hire the same firm. Is that something that people think is going to be worthwhile?
Well, I can only say yes, based on my limited exposure to Tetra Tech, and I'm thinking specifically about their response to the request for proposal that we sent to them, which was the same request for proposal that we sent to all the other potential consultants. In comparing Tetra Tech's response to BSC's response, I got the sense that BSC was better prepared to talk about impacts to the buffer zone.
What were you going to say?
No, go ahead.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah. No, what we would want from BSC and an NOI process is a much more, I feel at this point, then we would have a much more measured and better and less time constrained approach, which will happen with the NOI.
Yeah, can I just say that, though, that now my whole feeling about our use of BSC has changed, because before we found out all this more current information about how the process is supposed to unfold, I thought, we were going to potentially go to ZBA and ask that certain aspects not be waived. And then based on that, BSC would, formulate its recommendations. So now that's not going to happen in the context of the NOI. The NOI is just going to be reviewed entirely under WPA.
Right, which is not toothless. I don't want to undermine, and I don't want to underplay what the NOI process under the state act amounts to as well. But right, it's an awkward position coming that we're doing it at this point in the time when, right, it's quite a number of months into the project in front of the ZBA, and that there's clearly been some miscommunication and some poor communication internally in the town about some of this. So I'm not quite sure whether I want to, whether it's worth making the argument. I mean, I don't know. I go back and forth whether it's worth making the argument that we want to have that kind of BSC review in time versus some specifics.
Can I maybe, I'm trying to straddle these issues, and I'm thinking like, could we at the very least, or as a first step, reach out to ZBA about either using Tetra Tech or hiring a third-party consultant, but either way talking about, because I see our comment letter being developed, but I also see sort of holes in our ability to really articulate what those issues really are, or articulate them as conditions that ZBA can put in place. And so to me, like a conversation with ZBA about the ability to either use Tetra Tech or to hire a third-party consultant, even though my feeling is this: are we later in the hearing process, the ZBA hearing process? Yes. Has the hearing been closed? No. So it's worth asking whether whether either of those options could work, because if they don't work, we're on our own, and we need to develop the comment letter. We need to do it in fairly quick fashion, and we need to get it to them. If there is some opportunity there for us to access expertise in these areas that we are concerned about, then that is the other path that we're going to go down. So to me, I'd like to sort of, whoa, I just saw 3 hands.
I just want to make clear, it's more a point of information. I want to make, maybe I wasn't clear in the beginning, that the ZBA is willing to give us access to some technical support, such as easily using Tetra Tech, for example, because that's
right.
Made. They have, from their point of view, certain time constraints. And this is probably maybe the last issue before they would probably close their hearing.
Okay.
The summary. So, but if we wrote a letter saying these are the issues we want, let's say Tetra Tech to review as part of coming up with some conditions that are based on our local bylaw and issues like that. Then they're waiting for that, and they would allow us to even talk to Tetra Tech between now. Their meeting, they set up their next meeting for April 14th.
Okay.
They're willing to have, I think they're willing to basically have us talk with Tetra Tech even during that period, if I even understand, because they're under contract, and so we can draft a letter, and they're looking for the letter.
Okay. All right. Let me just get Carol and Dave's comments, and then we'll come back.
Yeah, I would just support, I think, where Michael was going, which is that, we're really kind of overdue with this letter. I did, the one I shared from Topsfield was actually less detailed than what we can share. I mean, we've seen a fair amount of information already, I think. And I think it's really incumbent on us to get back to the ZBA as quickly as possible, at least with our broadest concerns. I do understand that we want to become more detailed. Maybe that letter needs to be written in such a way to tell ZBA that, what we'd like to do to get more of that detail and provide more guidance to them. But I feel pretty strongly that we've lost time, and we need to get our overall input over to ZBA.
But I'll just repeat again, it's not overall input. We have to be specific. That's my issue with the old letter was that that we've learned that kind of generalities are not sufficient.
Right, if we want conditions based, if we want conditions based on our local regulations, if we want those in there, yes, we have to be specific, 100%. Dave, did you have a comment you were going to make?
You're muted, Dave.
You're muted.
I know. Thanks. Yeah, I agree with both what Michael and Carol, what you had just stated. Do you get more detailed? Do you get less detailed? How much information do you want to put in there from a regulatory standpoint and from those conditions that we already, or I'm sorry, those resource areas that are already jurisdictional based on the plans that we have received through the comprehensive permit process. But what I was thinking about as a part of this is that if we do hire a peer reviewer, if we do, and I could be wrong, if we do hire a peer reviewer or we do it internally ourselves, this letter, drafting conditions as such that might accommodate our bylaw. That was, and I'm asking the question, would that have to go back through the ZBA back to the project owners to determine whether or not those particular conditions are economic or not? Because I'm thinking of the timeline here and a variety of different disciplines that might have to be involved, from an accounting standpoint and perhaps from a legal standpoint as well, as we proceed with this draft that we come up collectively with or through a peer reviewer. Just an observation.
Right, and that's definitely what would happen. So, right, we would, if we made recommendations for conditions and ZBA was willing to write them into the order, but the applicant thought that it made the project economically infeasible, they would have to argue that to ZBA, or if they were going to appeal those particular conditions, or however, whatever legal mechanism or administrative appeal mechanism they went through, definitely. So I guess my question for you, because I feel like we're going to run out of time here tonight for this, is, again, I have not looked closely at the letter, at the revisions to the letter that Carol and Michael did. And what I would propose is this. I reach out to the chair of the ZBA, let them know that we are working on a draft of a letter, talk to them about accessing Tetra Tech, and I might even ask them just about, where they are in the process and all that kind of stuff, and just sort of get a sense from them of what they need and when they need it. And then maybe I can feed that back to the commission, or Dave can as the agent, so we're not worried about open meeting law issues. And then we can kind of, if we have to sort of finish a letter and submit it, then that's what we'll do. But if we can actually access Tetra Tech with our letter and have them sort of augment it, or whatever that process might be in short order, obviously, then we can just embark on it. Does that seem like a reasonable thing to do, or do we need to do more tonight or decide more tonight?
I guess the only thing, I'm sorry, the only thing I'd be concerned about, Neil, is that, if we haven't worked with Tetra Tech, that could be putting, a few more weeks in that really might be a problem. So
a problem from what perspective? From a
timing perspective, because we haven't worked with Tetra Tech on this directly, have we? Or are you?
No, we haven't.
No.
I think when you work with a consultant, there's a good chance they'll need some startup time.
Right, but I would say this is that I don't know when the clock stops. I don't know when that 180 days. I don't know. Do Todd or Roy, do you know when they have to close by or seek an extension by?
I'd have to double check, but I believe it is May 9th. But
Okay.
100% it's right around that date.
I mean, I think that we can move expeditiously. I think hiring a new consultant would be a real trick, but I think getting Tetra Tech involved for this particular piece of it over a 2-week period, because they're involved in the project, they know the project, they have not been asked to sort of weigh in on this particular issues that we're going to bring up, but they'd certainly be familiar enough with, what's going on with the project. I think they could hit the ground running at the very least. I mean, I understand, yes, there is a time constraint. There's no question about that. But the alternative is we just write something that's, potentially ineffective or something like that. Jean?
Not to throw a wrench in all of this, but I I'm of the opinion that if we wanted to pursue getting assistance from BSC, it would be available immediately,
Okay,
except
Well-
for the financing of it.
right. So, all right, let's do, so then my proposal stands, which is I reach out to ZBA, get a better sense, a clearer sense of the timing. I talk to them about accessing Tetra Tech or their stomach or willingness to potentially hire a third-party consultant, BSC, for us, and only if the timing will work. And then I think in parallel, the letter that's been drafted and people have taken a couple of passes at, I think more feedback can come in on that, go to Dave, so that again, it's all the comments are going to him, and we can sort of decide what to do with that letter once we have some answers from ZBA. Does that seem reasonable?
I think so.
Okay, thank you, Cindy. Yes,
That's a
Michael.
good game plan.
Okay,
I'm
thank
worried
you.
about timing of whether we could have a letter, when we would have a letter. Yeah, I'm only trying to think of whether we basically trying to, would we be able to write a letter, essentially whether we're approving that some subgroup can prevent a letter to the ZBA before its 14th meeting, or that we're not doing this until after our next meeting, which is later.
Well, let's do this. Let's try to set some mechanism up now, because if the answer back from ZBA is I need this by the 14th meeting, then we have our marching orders. So I'm fine with creating a subgroup to work on it. Totally fine with that. Carol?
Yeah, I would agree with this idea of the April 14th meeting. I would like to say that we make it the goal to get it to them by the April 14th meeting for the following reason. If they have to close on May 9th, I don't know how many meetings they're going to have in between. They need time to consider our input.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so if we get it any closer, we're just not giving them an opportunity to think about that in a deliberate way or to come back to us with questions. So
Right. Well,
I think we really have to set ourselves that deadline, it sounds like.
They
Well,
can
let-
seek extensions, although that's not ideal.
Yeah, but they would need to, again, like consider it enough to decide to do it.
let me do this part. Let me talk to ZBA and get a sense of what they do need, like in terms of time, all of that stuff. Because I feel like we're sort of guessing and thinking that they're going to want it to do a certain way. I don't know. Maybe they're going to delay the hearing for some other reason. I don't know. I mean, it sounds from Michael was at the meeting last night that that's not the case. But regardless, I agree that we should try to target having a letter ready for the 14th. So I think doing these things in parallel makes sense. Where my worry mainly lies with this letter being done by the 14th is we won't have anybody else's input. If we could get Tetra Tech online or BSC online in really quick fashion, then maybe they could help with the drafting of that letter. That's really tight for the 14th, really tight.
I don't think the letter has to have the actual conditions and specifics, as opposed to laying out that these are the areas that we would like the peer review to comment on to
Okay.
generate possible. That's why there's a middle ground there. They want to see
Okay.
a process started, which could include, for example, saying even tonight that we agree that whether, because of their work with the stormwater, whether we want to say to get Tetra Tech going sooner than later.
Okay.
Reviewing it with our constraints, and everybody would like to see that kind of thing started sooner than later. And whether there's other areas that we would want peer review, just telling them what areas we would like some help with.
Okay.
That might come up with conditions is sufficient for the 14th.
Okay, great. Then in that case, who's going to be in my little subgroup? Because I'm out of time.
Oh, I mean, I'll
No.
volunteer to the extent that I can give input. I think I gave most of my input, but if you need any help, I'll certainly help.
Well, it depends how many people we have. If I say I'd be willing to do it too, whether there's another person that would want to take a shot instead of Carol.
I think it would be better if somebody who's more attuned to the regulatory part of it volunteered.
I can weigh in on it too.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to decline.
All right. So between Carol, Michael, and I, we will work on a draft. Okay. And then in the meantime, I literally tomorrow will reach out to ZBA and just get a sense of their timing and access to Tetra Tech or whatever else we've talked about tonight. Does that seem reasonable?
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, let's.
McDowell's have any comments?
I want comments, but we got to move. So I'm happy to hear any comments from the McDowells.
I think we're fine.
Okay, great. Thank you, G. All right. Fantastic. All right, we're going to jump to our next topic. And those who came tonight for Coolidge Crossing, thank you for attending. All right, so next on our agenda is our Dodd Pond discussion regarding potential restoration or remediation, I should say, and what we're calling the Dodd Ponds. So welcome to Mark. I see Jonathan, I see Deshang.
Good evening.
Welcome. And Fred too, I see Fred as well. Okay. How are things going?
So if I may begin, Neil, I'll start
Please.
off with the recent developments. It appears that there possibly is some sort of an agreeable settlement between Fred and Jonathan as of this afternoon.
Great.
However, it's my understanding that a part of it is to get some clarification from you guys, for example, on, let me back up and frame it. So what Fred has done in order to try and help settle this is simply knock a little bit off the total cost to the tune of 20 total, which is about 10 less than what the remediation proposal is. And however, wants to ensure that, and he will incur the cost of executing the small dredge at the bridge that we talked about last time. However, the agreement was that Jonathan, through his current permit or any additional work, would incur the processing and any costs associated with getting you guys to help permit that through. So I guess my guess is Jonathan probably has some questions for you as to how you guys can do this as expeditiously and cost effectively as possible for him.
Yeah, so maybe if I can just jump in there. I think the nature of the discussion was that we were trying to include the cost of the remediation as part of the existing enforcement order, and it's part of the order of conditions anyway, addressing the pond issues. I think that would be the request you make to the commission, if that's something you could all agree with.
It would have to be, that order of conditions is already issued.
What's it like an amended? Can we?
Yeah, that's my question.
Can we make an amended?
The pond was mentioned in the order of conditions though, right? And
yeah, it required us to settle with
remediation.
Mediation with the owner. So therefore, under that umbrella, so it's just the elaboration from the commission to allow what kind of remediation can be happen. I think that's probably just if that can be either through a simple amendment or when we coming up the solution or get approval.
Right. In fact, I would, I agree with Deshang. I would add to that and say that there should be some sort of amendment that outlines these final solutions so that everybody is covered for years to come for the ongoing maintenance, right? So
Yes.
Even the act of placing the equipment in the pond, the biological treatments, et cetera, there should be something updated in the OOC to reflect what the general, we don't have to get too specific, but the general nature of what's being done.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I think doing that as an amendment makes perfect sense. What do other people think?
I agree.
Yes, it's just a question of what level of amendment. And just quickly looking at the regs, it's not a minor change. It's the question is it moderate or significant? But even if it's a moderate change, which I think it clearly is at a minimum, it requires a new hearing. It requires a separate filing fee.
So let me ask you a question, Gene. If there's a broad definition that remediation is required, and it fits under that definition, why is that a moderate amendment?
Because it's the activity, I'm assuming the activity proposed would meet the standards that define what a moderate amendment is. In other words, it would be an increased impact to, at a minimum. You know, it's a list of about 8 items, 7 items. Increase in potential for erosion, decrease in the size of the no alteration area. I mean, I haven't looked at it carefully, but it's
Well, let me ask you this question.
change in the size and location.
What is the filing fee associated with a moderate amendment?
It's $500.
So if we had the details and we had a hearing that had the information about what was to be changed, at this point, I'd be perfectly happy to waive that $500 fee. I'd rather that money go to the work. But I mean, that's just one commissioner's.
Yeah, you'd have to bring it to a vote.
Yeah. So, sorry,
I'm wondering, Suni, I don't know if it's possible. So, yeah, that makes perfect sense. I guess if you can get the rest of the commission to do that. But the other is it potentially could essentially require it as an emergency action. In other words, you know, this event has happened. This has got to be cleaned up. I guess it doesn't really matter how you do it or what you want to call it, but I think there are a number of ways around it, given that I see what Gene is saying, but it is very small scale, very localized, and very much part of the remediation, as the Sheng pointed out. So if there is a way the commission can wrap that in or expedite it with a minimal amount of additional work, I think you're right, it can go towards the work.
I wouldn't be in favor of calling this an emergency certification because the conditions that we might want to impose on it would not be binding. We would not have the same sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Accountability.
Go
ahead.
Sorry, I don't think there's an issue, at least in my mind, in if they can define what the work is, and we have a hearing about it at some point to add that in. I mean, we allowed a lot of work to go on because of the fact that there were sort of ongoing impacts throughout this project. So I'm much more concerned about the work getting done and us having documentation of it than I am about the timing. I'd rather move expeditiously to get this in place and, you know, have the hearing when we need to have the hearing, I guess. And maybe that's my way of saying I'm okay with it being an emergency, but I'm trying to say, like, can we work with the existing process of having a moderate amendment, but do it expeditiously in a way that allows them to go forward with the work? That's my question.
Just 1 second, Sheng, we could post a hearing for the May 6th meeting.
So let me ask the applicant or Mark, when are you proposing, or Sheng, when are you proposing to do this work?
So the dredge, so I think to be clear, so there's 2 parts. So mostly what Gene is referring to is this additional dredge work. I think everything else is actually covered or exempt. In other words, the aeration, et cetera, we can get going on that immediately. The dredge work wouldn't happen until later season when things dry down anyway. Okay. So if you guys can get this going in May, Sheng, can you get this going somehow, either on the existing permit or an additional request for amendment? And I think we would probably have it issued, assuming it moves expeditiously, as Neil pointed out, we would have it probably before the timing of the work for the dredge itself.
Yeah, so we talked about so definitely there will be a timing. So the timing is to wait until in this late summer. Correct. Or early fall, so that there's no continuous flowing water to the downstream wetlands. So because that's my concern, I would like to recommend that's a timing control, because without that one, it's very difficult to control the impact. So we get to be very vigilant and very thoughtful, watching the weather and to get it planned out. So how soon we can get the dredging done within the time frame under the certain weather condition. And secondly, as Neil mentioned, and I do echo Jean's concern about, so what is not the legalism say we need what kind of amendment, but I do feel should thought through is what possible impact. So obviously our major goal here is to improve it, to remedy the impact. So we are not trying to proposing anything here to order the resource for impact. So we are remediation. We are not actually proposing some other work that will impact the resource. Right now we are trying to remedy the impact. So it's a little bit different from other things. So that's therefore under the order of conditions that we have to remedy the impact. I feel we should be able to get covered, but I need to be giving you an elaborated plan so you feel comfortable. And
right. It's actually the work that you would apply towards the goal of mitigating the existing impact. The work itself is the thing that is the subject of an amendment.
So what I would say, so let me ask this question, because again, I think this is really just boiling down to procedure more than anything else and making sure we do it right. I think that if there's, so let me, Mark, you had said that there are certain things like aeration and that kind of stuff that doesn't, you're saying does not require.
Typically the act of simply managing a pond system by virtue of the aeration, I think we're covered for. Correct me if you guys see it differently, but that obviously, so that's the financial component of this, and that could happen very soon once this is closed and Fred and Jonathan settle everything up. As DeShang pointed out, and I'm in agreement, we typically don't do our dredge work until September when water levels are at their lowest and things are quite a bit drier. So we have no problem with that. That's absolutely the intention, is to do so. So there's two separate parts here. We want to, as we've talked about all along, we don't want to lose another season of getting treatment in the pond to get everything remedied or begin the remediation. So we don't want to tie the bulk of this to the dredge, for example, in other words, dragging this out. The dredge should be its own separate amendment, if in fact it's an amendment. I think everything else can either be resolved this evening, if the commission feels the need to put something in addition in the order, or we're already covered with the act of pond management activities that essentially have no impact other than enhancement.
Can I ask, does anybody have the language of the order handy so that I don't remember what's in there that refers to future remediation in the pond?
If I remember offhand, Gina, I'm not sure it specifies, because at the time, the order, if you recall, we were at that last hearing when you guys closed the notice for Silverwood, and we were all up very late. And I think the idea was to simply, and correct me if I'm wrong, simply get something in there to make remediation and the process of negotiating remediation a requirement between Silverwood and the abutter, in this case, Fred. So I'm not sure we got into any specifics at the time, unless something's been added since.
Okay, so the reason I ask that is because I'm thinking that, I don't understand the technicalities of what you would describe, Mark, as the first step in the process, but I'm thinking that perhaps the first step in the process that would be conducted sooner rather than later, depending on what it actually is, could be considered a minor modification, but that the dredging piece of this would definitely be something that required a hearing for an amendment.
Okay, that's a good way to break it up. So yeah, so if you go to the remediation plan, essentially in summary, the minor activities would be the act of getting ready to install the aeration system, and then any additional biological treatments that go along with that. So basically steps 1, 2, and 3 in the remediation plan, which was submitted, would all fall under, should all fall under that minor.
Did I share the OOC?
Yeah, I was going to say, I was just looking at
If
it.
I may
So-
read the section of the order, it says remediation measures for adverse historic impacts on Dog Pond related to Silverwood Farm activities will be worked out between the applicant and the Fred Dot within 60 days. So I feel it's not amendment rather than elaboration of that work need to be documented and elaborated for the record, because that things is already required us to do under the order. It's not really to change in the order, it's rather than to work it out. So this is part of the workout exercise and elaborating the details that the two parties agreed, and then to give it to the commission as a record. That's what
I actually agree with DeShang here, because it says measures will be approved. So maybe the remediation plan is the measures and we can just vote on it.
Right.
Exactly. That's what I was just going to suggest. Can you just vote to approve these?
So what are the three measures now? Are you doing the aeration? You have the dredging, or whether we're keeping that separate?
Keep it
or not?
separate.
Besides aeration, what are the other steps that were?
The dredge is adding the time into it, because so otherwise if to prevent unnecessary impact to the downstream. So because at the time we don't know whether we need it. If you remember at one point we talked about dredging to remove sediment in the wetlands.
Oh, no, I'm beyond that. I just want to know specifically, besides aeration, what other measures are you ready to implement right now?
It's more like a continuous timing maintenance down the road.
Yeah, that we can come up right.
And but I still think we've got a couple of gaps here. One is that I got to be honest with you, dredging, I want like that's wetland impacting thing. It's got to be done right. I want some sort of oversight there. The other thing is referring to something that Mark brought up at the outset, which is putting something into the order where, you know, that's sort of protective of all parties in terms of the in perpetuity or the period of time it's supposed to last over, or whatever those things are. So maybe having an amendment makes some sense while we can still authorize the work that we want to go forward as soon as possible tonight.
Yeah, aeration,
just,
dredging, and the chemical treatment, the
Right.
treatment, and then the long-term maintenance.
I'm a little confused, Neil. Are you saying, are
So
you
am I.
agreeing to what I suggested earlier, that the more immediate
As a minor modification.
remediation be part of a minor modification, and the dredging be part of an amended order of conditions?
So if I'm hearing correctly, yes, Gene, that's how I see it. I think so. In the short term, in the interim, the commission may simply vote on approving the current proposed remediation plan, which involves installation of the mechanical aeration equipment, in addition to the biological treatments as an activity. And that's separate from requiring a major amendment coming down the road for another hearing for the dredge, which would take place later this season.
Okay, I just want to make sure that everybody on the commission understands that embedded in the definition of a minor modification, it says, the commission will consider the following criteria in determining whether it's minor. Number one, the extent of the modification. Number two, the proximity to the wetland. And number three, the type of equipment required for construction. So this is new equipment. It's applying, you're talking about chemical modification also, yes?
No, I mean, we say chemical, no, they're actually natural. So they're biological.
Biological substances.
Right.
But
Enzymes, bacteria, we're not using chemicals in this approach.
So let me ask this question, because, well, so first of all, you said there's a remediation plan. I don't see it on our Dropbox. Is that something you just submitted, or is this from a while back?
That was a while back.
Okay, all right.
Recall, and then just as an FYI, if you'll recall, then more recently We submitted an addendum to that, sort of outlining some of the anticipated costs Fred would actually have over time. Do you recall that?
I do.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, so that the first part of the body of that is the original remediation plan. That never changed.
So with the new constraint of your financial arrangement, that proposal hasn't changed?
No, the outline of the proposal essentially has not changed, Gene. That's correct. So the same activities will take place.
So I still think that while we could fit this other stuff under this remediation stuff in the order, I sorry, I stated one thing and I'm kind of backtracking on my own thoughts, but I really do feel like for the dredging piece of it, I would like to have that sort of moderate change documented, have a hearing, and I'm happy again to waive the fee. And especially since we have the time to kind of wedge it in, and that won't come later. But I would like to, and I understand your point about minor modification, Gene. I guess what I would say is that the stuff that we're talking about, my biggest concern, it's just like when that water was coming down that hill and we told Joyce to go drop some rocks in there, even though we hadn't issued an order, we hadn't done anything, but the timing of it was so imperative that we wanted to do something. I feel like that's where we are. I do not want to go through another start of a hot season without getting this stuff in place. And even though we're in the wetlands, so in terms of what's in the minor changes definition, it's kind of we're up against it there. I still want to authorize that work now and then come back. And even if we document it later, put it in as part of the moderate change later, I'm fine with that. But I want to get that work underway. For me, that's the biggest imperative right now.
Okay, but fine to go ahead with that. The commission needs
Can issue a letter like we did the last time or
the
something.
commission
like
needs
that.
to vote to approve the work that we're talking about as minor now, based on documentation that's not really in front of us, but I'm okay with that because we looked at it before.
Yep.
Well, the logic before was that that doesn't even have to be done as minor because it's measures to be approved by the commission. It comes under that condition, and the order of conditions was just measures just have to be approved by the commission.
You're objecting to a vote?
No, we still have to approve it by a vote. It's the question is whether we're doing it 2 stages as a minor change and then we vote on it. That's all. I thought we were heading in a place where whether that, I guess, I could go either way, but I'm
right.
saying
I know what Michael's
before.
saying, which is it may not really be a minor modification, and we don't even have to worry about classifying it as such. We can classify it as part of the remediation measure that's specified in the order and still just articulate what those things are and sign off on it. So,
all right. Well,
sorry, Cindy.
I'm sorry. I'm always a stickler for the rules. I
Yeah,
would advocate that we vote to accept what's being put forth for the immediate modifications to be minor, just so it's in the record.
That's fine. Okay,
Well,
but I've got 2 hands up. So Cindy, you had your hand up. Did you want to add something?
I did have my hand up, but I was going to make the point that Michael made.
Okay, Deshang, you had your hand up.
Yeah, as I said, I just feel this is not even an amendment. It's probably, if it's an amendment, it's more like an elaboration of their condition supposed to be worked out. That's exactly what written, because we carry that, we understand that the scope of work is in the pond, we didn't change. So that's already defined, right? The scope of work is within the pond, which didn't change. And that the remediation details, we didn't know at that time, but we know it's needed. Everybody knows that. But that's why we spelled it out, say it needs to be worked out. So it means right now at this stage is under that same umbrella. We are not getting outside of the umbrella to work all the details. And as Mike suggested, the commission policy or it's embedded in that condition 33. We do need to coming back to you. You feel comfortable. We can carry out. I think it's not even amendment to be honest.
I don't think it makes a difference in the.
I don't think it makes.
I agree.
It's all procedural.
I don't mind making it a minor.
I don't either, because then we'll have the each of the elements. So Mark, tell me what you're going to do sooner than later that we're going to vote on as a minor amendment or a minor change tonight.
Okay, sooner than later, we're going to begin the process of getting the utility out, the power out to the pond that we need. and ordering and installing the mechanical aeration equipment. And then when temperature dictates, we begin the biological treatments.
Okay, is that it?
That's it. That's
Great.
it.
I move that we approve those elements as a minor modification to the order tonight, and then you'll come back to us with the dredging when the time comes, and we will waive the fee on that moderate change at that time. That's my motion.
Oh, we're combining, okay. Sure, I'll
Do I have a
second.
second?
I'll second.
Second.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
I just have a quick question because I don't remember what was previously presented. It was a while ago. For the installation of that equipment, can Mark, can you describe what level of disturbance, if any, there would be, or is it simply placing it into the pond?
Sure. So no, it's basically, so there's a very small trench somewhere from the house to a location nearby to the pond, but not too close because we want it high and dry, where a power control panel is installed. And then from there, there's a small hand trench to just bury the air line in the case of the compressor for the aeration, and or the power cords for the fountain into the pond. So no, there is no significant disturbance whatsoever.
And would you mind also describing again what the biologics were, just so as a refresher, since we're about to vote?
Sure. So the treatment program throughout the season involves a number of different things, including enzyme, trace mineral organics, and also bacterial supplements in order to try and digest the excessive nutrients that are sitting in that main basin of the pond where we're having the serious algal blooms. And it's a series of treatments 4 to 5 times throughout the year, and in varying combinations thereof.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
You're welcome.
Okay. Any other discussion? Michael?
Would you take a modification that we'll get some sort of reporting on how this goes?
I will accept that modification. Any other discussion or that amendment to my motion?
Sorry, I just, as I'm taking notes, did you say that the dredging is going to be a minor or a
No, moderate.
moderate? Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? All right. All those in favor, Jean?
Aye.
Neil, aye. Michael?
Aye.
Courtney? Cindy? Carol?
Oh, God,
I was lip reading you, Cindy. I got you. Carol?
Aye.
Jessica?
Aye.
Great. All right. So get cracking and come back to us with the dredging.
Okay.
And we'll talk about it. I guess we'll put you on the agenda in May. Is that what we should do?
Sure.
For the dredging.
I'll coordinate with Deshang, and then Deshang will come forth to you guys with a dredge plan.
Okay, Jean?
If I may, if the dredging is not going to occur until things dry up a bit,
That's right.
May 6th is already, I'm sorry, it's already another monster meeting. So the second meeting in May, which I think would be May 20th, would be preferable.
That should be fine for our purpose.
Okay, great. All right. Well, everybody, I will, what is it?
Before you go, Jonathan, hopefully at the end, at that same meeting, you'll give a report on the changes that were to be made in like in Pond 3 and other things like that, whether we can have an update of what's going there. And while you're here, I would like to see, at some point I will call you up because I'd like to take our new agent who is up there, and Dave Henkels is our new agent. I'd like to just give him a little quick walk of what the stuff that was done in your field. So I'll coordinate with you at some point and give you a call so I could just give him a little tour. You could decide if you want to join us so that he knows what's going on, if you don't mind.
Yep, that's good. And I'll definitely join you guys for that.
Okay,
great. All right, so I'm going to wrap up with just by saying I cannot be more thrilled that you guys figured it out because I wasn't sure what to do with you, and I was going to just sit here and let you guys talk while we were here, because mediation when it's hard to agree is hard to do. So I appreciate both of you guys getting together and and sorting it out, because I'm glad that we've got some remediation that can go in there sooner than later. So thank you, Courtney, for your little thing there. So, little.
So who's going to prepare? Who's going to prepare the request to amend? Is that going to be DeShang?
I can do it. So it's just I probably need some information from Mark. Maybe we can combine together. So
Okay.
Yes, we will coordinate. Absolutely.
Right, yeah. Let's please have that to the commission at a minimum 2 weeks before May 20th.
Okay, May 20th.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Neil.
All right.
Very
Thank you.
good. Thank you.
All right. What is next?
Hey, Neil.
Yes.
We are making progress. 3 Oldfield.
All of the sort of the big monster projects from last year, we are tying bows on them all. Which is
now
lovely.
we're ready for more big monster projects.
It's 10 o'clock. I'm like, we're like on time.
I'm driving us tonight.
Yeah.
Gotta
It's
get
good because I'm fried at this point.
I know. Look, 10 o'clock comes and I think everybody's just about ready. So let's finish off what we got to do. 41 North Main Street. So 41 North Main Street and 31 Hunting. Courtney, do you want to update us? No, but this might matter to what we're going to talk about. But maybe it's premature.
Yeah, the select board meeting is happening right now. I don't may even still be going, but from what I heard from the other person in this house who's attending the select board meeting, they voted to exercise their right of first refusal, and the plan is for the town to purchase that Hunting Lane parcel, and I guess the Holamkas might buy it from the town.
Yeah, there's
do that.
Yeah, they voted. I'm not sure what the vote was, but they were going to talk about exercising their right and either buying it, the town buying it, or assigning that right to the Holamkas and Unity Farm, and then there would be whatever sort of funds would have to be raised to acquire the parcels that are under the protection. So that may very well drastically change what's going on at those two properties, depending. I don't know what I never really sorted out which parcels were the ones under 61B, but yeah.
So therefore, we don't have to. So the current proposal of those two developments is. I guess the question is, do we still have to weigh in? Because it seemed in the last ZBA meeting that they're still going to go ahead for a comprehensive permit.
I think we should, so as much as I hate to add more work to our plate, I think we still need to weigh in, because I know at least with the this right of first refusal business is not settled, because there were legal part of like the whole, and this is my fault, dropping the ball, not keeping the commission up to date. I kind of thought we had commented, but I guess that was on their no, it was to the housing people or whatever. But so a lot of it is legal wrangling over the appraisal, the original appraisal, which, our town council said, that's not a legit appraisal. The select board went and got a separate appraisal, which is significantly different than what the original appraisal was by the property owner. So there's a disagreement on that. And then there was a disagreement about when the right of first refusal had even started. And so, select board council said that the clock didn't start because it wasn't a legitimate appraisal. So there's a lot of like legal wrangling about that whole business. And I just think for covering all the bases, we probably ought to comment on the project so that no matter what, we've got
Hey.
our 2 cents in there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just prudent. So question is, I mean, how much do we know about, there have been so many incarnations of this project.
So,
I don't even, I
yeah.
haven't looked at the latest,
So
so.
part of it is that like there were some plans submitted. And then not long ago, they changed, I think they were supposed to be duplexes on Hunting Lane. They changed to single family and redid the plan. And then only just at the most recent ZBA meeting did they finally submit the stormwater and all that stuff. So like there hasn't even been like a solid plan, you know, and they were concerned about how the consultants could even consider the plan, you know, when it changed, and it was kind of half-baked for a little bit. So, but a bunch of stuff got submitted at the last meeting. Like it just got posted on the website right before the last ZBA meeting. So there's stormwater plans and updated floor plans or whatever.
Did ZBA do what they did with Coolidge Crossing in terms of peer reviewer being hired, and have they done any of that yet?
Oh, yes. They've
was
had it
there-
for quite a while.
Was there a peer reviewer,
Yeah,
Michael?
PSC is the peer reviewer. They've been doing traffic and other kind of stuff.
Yeah, it
But I
was
mean-
very hung up on, there's been a lot of like things with the traffic consultant and that intersection, and whether like fire engines can turn around and stuff.
So, but did the peer reviewer they hired, do they have specific like wetland related responsibilities, or?
I don't
Hmm?
I don't think I saw any of the stuff at the very, like the first meetings where they considered, you know, the consultants. Like it's the more recent stuff that I've seen.
Well, I mean, I think it goes without saying that, well, actually here maybe is a better place for us to ask ZBA to acquire funds for us to have a wetland consultant outside the peer review process. You know,
I don't think that exists as a concept.
well, sorry, maybe I'm getting myself mixed up. Is the authorizing language or legislation that allows us to hire an outside consultant contained within the Conservation Commission Act?
This is for an NOI. They come to us for an NOI. The issue
No.
again, it's like the same issue as earlier tonight. If we're going to write a letter, we can write some general letters. The question is, they've asked for waivers of the wetland protection of the local bylaw. And do we want to say that, no, we don't want them to waive it because
Right, but-
Y and Z?
Right,
And-
the issue I'm bringing up is, do we want, since we're earlier in the process with these guys,
We're not actually.
well, if they just submitted their stormwater plan, we are.
No, they've basically they've opted not to submit a real plan. Or they did, actually, no, they did submit it. Actually, I take it back. They did submit something. I was thinking of their sewer and septic, their water and septic plans were skeletal. Right, we can just ask them whether we can write a letter asking them to say, now the wetlands there are there wetlands in the north, on the down Hunting Lane? Is a much
Ye-
different situation for
Well,
wetlands.
there's wetlands between
Oh,
41 North Main and 31.
Yeah, so the primary issue with the wetlands on Hunting Lane, if I'm remembering, because we had they had the filing for the wells.
Yeah, the public water supply, they want
I
to site it
don't
there.
think, I don't think the construction, because you have to be so far from the public water supply. I don't think any of those residences would affect it, but I think they have to come back to us for the directional drilling and going under the,
And for the extended drawdown test and the monitoring wells and the hydrology, all of that stuff that they were originally going to do
Right.
and never finished up on.
and then the thing on Main Street, the rental units, I do believe some of that, but it wasn't, I don't think it's a lot.
It's
Like
in
it
the
might have
buffer
been
zone.
grading or something.
Well, it's in the buffer zone across the railroad.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
It's sort of a peculiar buffer zone. It's not. a
Yeah,
real-
it's on the other side of the train tracks.
Yeah. Carol, were you going to say something?
No, yeah, I think Courtney covered it, that my recollection was that disturbance of, trying to get from the wells across the wetland. And my thought at one point, but maybe somebody else can verify this, was that is the piece of property that the town is exercising the right of first refusal. Is
That's what
essentially
I thought too, Carol.
Which
Yeah.
piece? Which piece?
The
Of
piece
it?
with the
where
wells.
the wells testing was done and where the
Well,
wetland is.
Yeah, there's parcels on 31 Hunting that are under 61B. I don't know which parcels because there's multiples at that address, but yes, that 31 Hunting is the site of the public water supply, the wells that they drilled. It is.
So that's just an interesting situation.
But
It
are
is.
there any wetlands by the septic area?
No.
Okay.
They're going to have a wastewater treatment plant. It's big enough, right? Yeah, they
Yeah,
have to.
that's actually up near, did you guys visit the site? Yeah, that's up,
Up
it's
the hill.
up near the original house.
Yep.
Yeah.
Question is, what do we need to write about in terms of Neil summarized the fact that, right, we got to deal with the directional drilling and the drawdown tests
Correct.
and any hydrologic impacts on the wetlands.
I mean, that's,
And whether that issue is something that, and then the stormwater, we're not quite sure that the stormwater stuff is all might be outside of our jurisdiction.
yeah, I didn't review
Right,
that
so
plan.
that- So the only question is whether we just have a letter that says that we are concerned about the drawdown, the hydraulic thing there, and if any stormwater outflows are in jurisdiction, that they take it into concern, and whether those, we just have to go on point there, and whether we're saying, and I'm not quite sure it makes a difference whether we do it under the bylaw or not under the bylaw for those things.
Well, I think some of the groundwater protection, because I think there was always this issue of the quantity of water,
Right.
which is an interest that's under the Wetland Protection Act, but it's also under our bylaw. And, I mean, there are some strange little catch-alls in our, if they're doing work in the 50-foot, then, there's an assumption of a significant adverse impact on the interests in our bylaw, which can include groundwater. And that doesn't mean necessarily only quality, it could be also quantity. And so, I think it's just like we were talking about earlier tonight with Coolidge Crossing, that there may be more teeth in our local regulations. And so we can ask for conditions based on those and then let the applicant argue that it's economically infeasible to adhere to the conditions. I think we're in the same position here, where it's stronger
That's what
argument
those
out of our
conditions
local
are.
regulations.
What are those conditions even?
Well, that's what we got to write, right? We don't know. Carol?
I just want to suggest that we don't ignore that, I guess, I don't know if it's an intermittent stream that goes along the back of the property there past
Yep.
the railroad tracks, because I don't know if you remember that I did a lot of research about the connectivity of the wetlands
I
there.
remember that.
And they're highly connected. And so that stream goes all the way across Hunting Lane. It goes under, I guess it's North Main Street, Route 27, and it enters into a big wetland complex. And so, contamination or even diminution of that stream could have impacts all the way down through those wetlands if it's substantial enough. So I think we have to look at that hydrology.
Yeah, we have to look at it because now that you're saying that, it rings a bell about the connectivity between the wastewater treatment plant up the hill and those wetlands down below, and whether there's a potential there for any kind of, obviously the wastewater treatment plant takes care of certain contaminants or by law and it's monitored and this, but we've also talked about, biologics like, emerging concern pollutants, medicines, that kind of stuff getting into water. So, I think there's a lot to talk about there.
Although it's in terms of the wetland issue for that, we're talking about several thousand feet. there.
Is
But
it that far away? I just didn't have
Really
the sense of the
far.
scale.
But the Groundwater Protection Committee hopefully is paying attention to that. I brought it up to Andrea that they should worry about just groundwater issues in general, coming from, I mean, the comment was made, it comes out of the treatment plant, it's drinkable. Except, right, those treatment plants don't really deal with pharmaceuticals and, as you say, the sort of CECs, emerging contaminants and whatever. But okay, but I mean, it's worth going on record for. I mean, we just have to be specific again about what we're going on record about. Again, it's that kind of what we're looking for versus the kind of general these are issues kind of thing. But
Courtney, do you know what the timeline is for this one? Like, you know, in terms of what their various next steps are and what we need to be.
Well, I was looking back because I don't think I put the next hearing on my calendar, but I was thinking when Neil reaches out to the chair of ZBA, it might be a good idea to ask, because I'm sure this.
It's on April 15th is the next meeting.
Oh, thank you. This recent development, I'm sure it would be helpful to know how they plan to handle the hearing from here on out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What their next move is, if they're gonna close it, or if they're gonna proceed as if nothing's happening and finish the process. I don't know.
Yeah, the last meeting they knew, unless the new vote makes a difference. It seemed at the last meeting they were going to play it out no matter what because they expected this to go to litigation.
Right.
Therefore, the end of it is the end of May is when the period's over. They have meetings scheduled for the May 6th as well as the April 15th.
Okay.
But so something can be drafted and even put together. I don't know whether we need to get it before the 15th, depends on how much we want to do something there too, versus get it for their May 6th meeting. I don't know.
Well, let's do this, because I don't know that we're going to sit here and talk through about specific conditions we want to try to impose on the project, because we really haven't looked at it. But I think what you're talking about is what we should do, which is I should reach out to the chair of the ZBA and ask him about timing, ask him what he set up in terms of wetland review from the peer reviewer and on and on. And then once I have that information and their timing, we can figure out what to do. I don't think it's as urgent as the Coolidge Crossing stuff, which we're going to, just go forward with this letter. But we need to find out timing. And what I can do is I'll find out and I can just disseminate that information to everybody. And then we'll probably end up talking about it at the next meeting. That's my guess. Is that acceptable to folks?
Yep.
Yeah.
Great. All right. Then in that case, I would love to kill off these violations, AAs, and let everybody go home. So maybe Dave, if you want to jump back in, we were talking about 68 Maple Street a while back, and maybe we can continue that. Oh, you're muted.
The old mute.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Thank you. So I think we ended on, or I ended on, certainly you folks didn't. How do we approach the homeowner? Given some of the findings that we've got, those that I observed physically a week or so ago, and then that which is available through GIS and just through some of the documentation that is already in the conservation office, which goes, certainly way back to DCR plan in particular. Aside from the concern that I had with that area that is jurisdictional, as I define it, behind the property that I went to make these observations, I indicated there were also some very significant wetland complexes on the north or the north side, and they are plus or minus 17 acres contiguous, and they attach to or are connected to various stream systems that flow up northeast. So I'm not sure where the commission wants to go with this based on what I've already stated. just to be a little clearer, there are multiple wetland complexes near the property. I don't know whether or not they're specifically on the property. Just based on overheads, I'm assuming part of them are. And if the forest cutting that's been seen behind the property, or I took the initial observations, I would think that there's a reasonable probability that that cutting extended to the other complex that I'm referring to. And if, you know,
When you say extended, do you mean to that it could be in the buffer zone of the
Yes.
of the wetlands, not
That's
the
correct.
wetlands itself? We're just talking about buffer zone issues.
yes, sir, that's correct, right? I'm just referring about buffer zones. And as I said, that one complex in particular that I couldn't see, just on GIS, national inventory, et cetera, it appeared to be very extensive. So is it the commission's desire that we approach the homeowner in a casual way, you know, ask him to reach out to the office, try to perhaps get some additional information over the phone, and ask if we can go out and take a visit on his property? I don't know what the answer is. That's why I'm asking you.
I know what I would say, but maybe, does anybody else have an opinion on how to approach this? I guess not.
I'm not going to express an opinion because I'm in a butter. So
Okay,
Oh, there you go.
I feel like we have a recent history for reasons that are difficult to define, of having enforcements and potential enforcements go unaddressed or dragging on for months. And in an effort to try to fix that and not have an enforcement issue on every agenda going on for months and months, which has happened before, I would suggest that if Dave feels pretty confident that the unauthorized activity is probably occurring in the buffer zone at a minimum, that a letter go out to the owner stating, you know, we have reason to believe, blah, 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 and we would like you to come to the meeting on X to talk to us about it.
I think it's totally reasonable.
Do we want to just do the meeting, or do we want to ask whether somebody could also make a visit beforehand, or just do the meeting first?
Yeah, it would be preferable to have Dave visit, you know, from on site beforehand. So that could be part of the request.
Jean, in that kind of letter, would we typically include some wording from, you know, the Wetland Protection Act or something like that? I think sometimes people are not aware, and it gives it a little more gravitas if they realize that there's some specific regulation, right? I don't know what we've done in the past. I think it might be worth considering.
Yeah,
If I get,
I think there's always been a little bit of a preamble paragraph. So yeah, that's definitely should be part of it.
Hey, Dave, you were going to say something?
no, Jean said just what I was going to say.
Okay.
Great
All
moment.
right. Great. So let's do that.
All right. I'll draft a letter, and if the commission is okay with it, I can send out a copy to Neil and Jean just for their perusal and finalization, or would you prefer that I just send a letter out direct?
I'd like to take a look at it.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. All right. 34 South Main, what's going on there?
Okay. So today was the day that the enforcement order, which was submitted to Mr. Conti, I believe, too many papers here, on 2/16 of 21. The letter included with the enforcement order stated that the commission would like to have a plan, a revised plan back to them, so that at least they'll have an opportunity between the time of receipt, which the deadline was today, and we do have that plan. and it gives an opportunity for the commission to review it between now and the next hearing, which is the 15th, which was articulated in the letter that accompanied the EO on the, I think it was the 16th. So he's taken the first step, and he's provided the letter. I've gone to the February 16th EO that was sent out, and there were approximately 8 or perhaps 9 items that were defined and requested or required as such in the new plan. And I can say that he's responded to everything. The markers are identified on the plan. I don't know whether or not we have an opportunity here to pull that up. Mr. Chair, that'd be great.
Is that in the Dropbox?
I don't think it is in the Dropbox.
Okay. There were a number, and I'll just, if you don't mind, I'll just take a moment and go through some of these items. And they have been very well defined, with the exception of several. There were markers that were asked to be installed on the ground defining the limits of the final driveway spur. And there are 3 markers that are defined on the plan as outlined in item number 1. Prepare a detailed plan to a scale of 1 inch at 10 feet of the final size of the driveway spur dimensions. Unfortunately, that came back at 1 at 20. The plan shall describe the construction and the proposed finished surface of the driveway. It will be a gravel surface 12 feet wide in a buffer zone of 750 square feet. And that is the area, that's the disturbed area that will remain, but that's what we're looking for in terms of the mitigation that's being requested under the EO. The planting plan, that was not submitted. And I had gone back and forth trying to determine whether or not the commission had, provided a planting plan. I didn't necessarily see one. I did see an item here that the plan shall include a planting layout to restore the remaining disturbed area and the native shrubs and trees. The plan shall indicate the type and size of native plants and proposed plant spacing. That's not a part of this plan. I had suggested to Mr. Conti that if he would like, we get together and I can go through the plan with him. I'm sorry, through the plants with him. I didn't see anything definitive. And if there's something definitive that I missed, please tell me. I didn't see number of shrubs, canopy cover, that kind of thing. So that referenced me back. And if I get the name in the title of the book wrong, please tell me. There's a buffer zone manual of sorts that the town put out regarding the type of native species that they would like to have grown, number of seasons, and it's a function of canopy. That was not included in the plan, and that was disclosed in the email that I received from Mr. Conti. There is a stone wall. There are multiple stone walls that are going to be used to permanently demarcate the driveway spur. There are actually 2 that have been provided on the plan. There's several others that reference is made to that aren't described any further on the plan. Just comments, the pile of brush near the well shall either be removed or scattered throughout the buffer zone. That's something I think we can attend to. Remove the pile of trash stored in the disturbed area. That I don't know. I haven't gone out there. All plants that do not survive during the first 2 growing seasons shall be replaced. You have a 90% survival rate demand. And really, in summary, the key item that's missing from this is the planting plan. And ordinarily, I'm accustomed to seeing an enforcement order that might define how that plan, is supposed to work, number of plantings, type of plantings based on topography and soils. And I'm asking the commission whether or not I should rely upon the manual, and I'm going to refer to it as the buffer manual for further guidance.
Well, if you, here's what I think. I think we were putting it on the onus on Mr. Conti to come up with, to make a selection, to do a little homework, to pick native plants that he favored, but that he figured out we're going to do well in that location. And we also it sounds like we were also putting it on him to decide on the density. And so, once he comes up with that information and puts it on a plan, that's what would be part of the evaluation on the 15th.
So is
And
it accepted?
if you want to refer him to guidance that's in this document that you're talking about, that's fine. I think there's a history of a lot of need for handholding, and that's been very time consuming on the agent in the past, and I don't want to see that continue to happen. So go ahead, Dave.
No, I'm sorry. I apologize. I don't mean to interrupt you. Well, if the commission would like, I'd be more than happy to take some time and go out and, go through the buffer zone manual as I see it defined as, and he can determine, what his favorites are. And I'll do a little bit of study on the back end just to determine whether or not there will be a 90% success rate over 2 seasons.
Can I just ask, because I don't know, I need to ask this question because I guess I need it clarified. So why is it that we let this owner at 34 South Main drag on and on and on and need hand-holding, and yet other owners hire a consultant like 11 Farm did, hire a consultant to come in and help them plan it out and pick out the plants and whatever? But this one's just been dragging on for months and months, and we just kind of let it go. And then we have, like you said, a lot of hand-holding, Jean. There's a lot of hand-holding that takes up time, where we have other owners that, they hire the appropriate people to help them with this stuff. I don't get why we let some of these go and why others, I don't know. It just seems so inconsistent.
I think this particular situation is unusual. I don't think it's that common for things this is really a simple problem, a simple violation that he got himself into. And I don't think there are other situations that have taken this long. And I don't think it's really, at this point in time, it serves any benefit to talk about why it's happened this way. It just has, Cindy, that it's come up at every meeting for about a year. And I can't define exactly why it's happened. I don't really want to get into it. I'll just say that. It is what it is. And yeah, it's what I alluded to earlier. I really don't want to see this happen. Most cases have been far better. 11 Farm Road was great. 81 Hunting was a little bit slow, but they finally got it done. So,
I mean, the truth is we can't force anybody to do anything. So when you have a cooperative homeowner, things go. When you don't, they don't.
We can force them if we get to a situation where we feel like it calls for fines, and the commission hasn't, been leaning that way in this particular case. So.
And historically, we don't, that's we don't like to do it, but sometimes we have to. But.
Right.
Well, if I could just suggest, we did give him a deadline to provide the plan to us by the 1st, and he does have the plan in front of us minus the planting plan. So I'd be more than happy to arrange a time to go out and meet with him and perhaps get some dialogue going with him, a dynamic as such, and go through the native plants that are in the manual that I had discussed. And we'll talk about canopy, and we'll talk about all the variables that go into it. And assuming that I get some kind of cooperation, the hope is that I can come back to the commission with a plan that outlines what you demanded. And that's principally the only thing left is the plantings. And the debris removal and that kind of thing we can certainly deal with as he proceeds.
That sounds fine, Dave. Just please remind him that the reason we had asked to see the plan today to evaluate it on the 15th is because we need some time to look at it. So what we don't want is to get the plan the day of the next meeting And I'm not putting that on you. I'm just asking
No,
you
no,
to remind him of that.
I will. Thank you for reminding me of that.
Fantastic. All right. Is that it? Wonderful.
Unfortunately, yeah, yes.
Excellent. All right. AAs. Let's do them.
Yeah, Dave, did you have any that you wanted to add to the list that was printed on the agenda?
I did. I had two, but candidly, I can't remember what they are.
Can you figure that out and send that to me so that I can?
Yeah, I think there's one. There was one more. I'll send it to you tomorrow morning.
Okay.
In terms of, I'll just make a note that I know there are issues for the Board of Health, that if there's anything related to soil testing, the sooner you get them materials, like I see a bunch of these are soil testing related, that it's particularly urgent to pass on to them as soon as possible. Any of these kind of AAs or anything related to soil testing because of the deadlines that they face in this month.
Yeah, I agree with you, Michael. They were really clear with me a couple of days ago about that demand.
As long as they made that evidently clear.
They
You
did.
can rely on Ellen. You can rely
Yes,
on
they
Ellen
did.
to make it clear.
Okay. All right. You want to quickly run us through these?
Oh, sure. I think I may have misplaced the second page of my.
I can read them. It's just a matter of reading them if that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, the only one that was, I mean, they were all soil testing. They were all outside of jurisdiction. I went out there on multiple occasions with those with Joyce, and she was an excellent resource, as she always has been. We did soil samples, did some vegetation as needed, checked the GIS, multiple GIS systems, stream stats included. The one that was interesting to the two of us was the construction of a new home. I forget what road that was on. I think it's like the second to the
Prospect
last.
Street.
I'm sorry?
Prospect Street.
That's correct, right. So we went out there, the home was built in 1869. It's completely, it's falling apart. And, there's nothing out there. It's up on a small, modest knoll, and there's nothing jurisdictionally that we could find anywhere around the perimeter of the house, and also depending on GIS as well. We took soils anyway. That's something I learned from her. Take soils all the time, no matter how clean you think the property might be. So that's all I have.
Okay, so the AAs are 15 Farm Road soil testing, 92 Lake Street soil testing, 3 Prospect new construction, 28 Wildwood soil testing, 45 Elliott soil testing. These are all activities outside the jurisdictional area.
I just remembered that the one that I didn't put there was 153 Nason Hill Road.
Okay.
And that was a pool demolition.
Okay, great. I move we adjourn.
I second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor, Jean?
Aye.
Neil, aye. Michael?
Aye.
Courtney?
Aye.
Cindy?
Aye.
Carol?
Aye.
Jessica?
Aye.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Well done.
Thank you. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Thanks.